I just biked around Lake Michigan.
Oh, way to go, Rob.
Oh, wow. Congratulations, Rob.
It's rainy out.
I did not know that. Wait, where did he go?
I just biked around Lake Michigan.
How long? How many miles?
Nearly 1,000 miles.
Oh, my goodness,
We're
Rob.
doing our warm-ups, guys. This is our podcast warm-up.
Isn't he impressive? That's our mayor, ladies and gentlemen, or our ex-mayor.
How's it going, everybody? Your Ben Joravsky show for a Friday.
A rainy day.
Rainy Friday.
Rainy
September
days
20th.
and Mondays always. Sorry.
What song was that?
Hanging around.
Sing that one part again.
Rainy days and Mondays always. Oh, there goes our listeners.
Yeah. Right from the beginning. All right. Your Ben Joravsky show for a rainy Friday, September 27th is moments away. But before we get into this, we need to thank the following unions for jumping on board and bringing back our program. First up, it's the International Association of Machinists and
I'm sorry.
Aerospace Workers.
I'm writing notes to myself.
Show prep.
Show prep, D.
Local 126 in District 8, the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 9, the International Union of Operating Engineers, Local 150, and, of course, today's show was brought to you by our good friends at the Chicago Federation of Labor. The Ben Joravsky Show starts now. It is Friday, September 27th, and live from the Chicago Sun-Times Chicago Reader Studio on Racine Avenue, this is the Ben Joravsky Show. Oh, Ben is dancing today. Today on the program, it's another Rummana Rundown with Sun-Times editor Rummana Hussain. We're talking national politics with political analyst Meredith Shiner. And the Heartland Mamas are back. I repeat, the Heartland Mamas are back. Murray Briel and Heidi Henry. And now your host, Heartland Papa, Chicago Reader columnist Ben Joravsky.
Yeah, hello, everybody. Ben Joravsky here. We're calling this When You're Right. You're right, Friday, and here's why. So, D, I took my break from my obsession with all things whistleblower gate today to read Bill Ruthart's front page story in today's Tribune. Here it is. Excellent story. Good job, Ruthart.
It's not about sports, is it?
No, it's not about sports.
Good.
No, that would have been on the sports page. Anyway, how about those Bears? Reset 2020. Sorry, I got distracted there. Anyway, it's about the striking auto workers in Michigan. As you know, they've been on strike for a couple of weeks now, or maybe 10 days or so. They voted overwhelmingly to walk, to set up the picket lines. Essentially, they're demanding wage hikes and benefits in lieu of the concessions they've made down through the years that have kept the auto industry alive. So they're taking it one step at a time. They start with General Motors, and obviously that will set the prototype for contracts to come with the other large auto manufacturers. Here's the thing, politically speaking. A sizable chunk of these auto workers voted for Donald John Trump in 2016, and, more to the point, they say they're going to vote for him again in 2020. This is according to Bill Ruthart's story.
Ready, set, 2020?
No, they
say
they're going to vote for him in 2020. Not ready, set, 2020. Anyway, blew my mind, Dr. D. I mean, I'm used to irrational behavior on the part of voters. I mean, I've been covering the Chicago electorate since 1981, and I'm always watching Chicago voters do something against their best interests, vote against their best interests, vote for politicians who raise their taxes, throw the money away, and say they're not raising their taxes. So I understand irrationality on the part of voters, but this one is really irrational. I mean, Donald Trump has done nothing, absolutely nothing, for striking auto workers in Michigan or striking auto workers anywhere. He has not used his massive power of the tweet to tweet out support. I think he had one tweet that was mildly supportive. You know how Donald Trump could go if he really wants to tweet out support, but he's been quiet on the tweet front.
No collusion.
He hasn't come to Michigan to walk the picket line with them. That would have been unbelievable. You imagine all the attention that would have received if Donald John Trump walked the picket line with them. No. Hasn't done any of his little sneaky moves like retaliatory threats against General Motors if they don't bend. He hasn't treated them like he treats the president, let's say, of the Ukraine. Hey, if you want that $425 million, you got to take care of an investigation into Joey Biden. You got it.
If you have a windmill anywhere near your house, congratulations. Your house just went down 75% in value. And they say the noise causes cancer. You told me that one, okay?
I forgot that. Anyway, hasn't done any of that. Here he is lending his massive tweet speaking power to destroying windmills. Hasn't even done anything remotely like that on behalf of striking auto workers. So there's no rhyme or reason why any of them would support him. It's more a case like that they apparently like his style. Like he's nasty, he's crude, he makes fun of people that they don't like, and apparently that's good enough. Meanwhile, according to Ruthart, Democratic candidates are flocking to Michigan, streaming up to the state to stand on the picket line with the striking workers. Be Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, Joe Biden is going to show up there. And it's sort of like, by and large, many of the striking workers, the Donald Trump supporters, hold it against the Democrats. It's like the Democrats are just doing it because it's the politically correct thing to do, to stand with them and support them. And so they're phonies, and so they're not going to vote for them. Like I said, I think I found a group of voters more irrational in their behavior than the ones I've been covering forever in the city of Chicago. But I will add this. According to Ruthart, the one Democrat that these striking workers seem to appreciate is one Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders. And when you think about it, D, Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump, definitely in ideology and policy, couldn't be more different. And yet, the workers who like Trump like Sanders. They think he's for real. He may be a little off the mainstream. He may be definitely not central casting type of your typical presidential candidate. He's got wild, unruly hair that never seems to be combed. His tie never seems to be straight. He sort of dresses like I do, but...
Are you describing Bernie Sanders or my uncle?
Or me, Uncle Eldon.
Yeah. But now, little Danny, come on.
But they like him because he's real. And this reminds me, 4 years ago, I had a raging debate with a good friend, Mr. Mondragon, El Dragon, Adolfo, and he was saying that Bernie Sanders was better set to win that election than Hillary Clinton. Man, we debated that one for, it seems like weeks and weeks and months. He was positive he was right. I was skeptical. I'm older than Adolfo. I'm still stuck in the old ways, those baby boomer waves where we remember the 1972 election where Nixon swamped McGovern. But you know what? I have to say, D, I have to come to the conclusion that El Dragon was right. Mm-hmm. And to quote Jack Nicholson from Chinatown, your favorite movie.
Love it.
When you're right, you're right. We got a great show today, everybody. Yes, indeed. Rummana Hussain is in here for the Rummana Rundown. Let's see what she has to say about the striking auto workers in Michigan. No, I'm probably going to ask her about, oh my God, we could have a Chicago Teachers Union strike here in the city of Chicago. And lots of interesting local news to talk about with Rummana Hussain. Meredith Shiner, political analyst, will be here. We'll be talking all things whistleblower gate, particularly how this thing, she foresees this playing out politically. And then in the final half hour, oh, yeah, the Heartland Mamas are making a return. Heidi Henry and Murray Brio Remember, Heidi is the horse farmer who ran against Sue Rezin for state senate at 38. She's unabashedly liberal, New Deal Democrat out in Grundy County, and she's coming into Chicago to give her thoughts on all the issues of the day, including my favorite issue of the day. Always my favorite issue, how Democrats can pick up Trump voters in Trump country. So looking forward to hear what the Heartland Mamas have to say about Whistleblowergate and all the other items in the news. But before we do any of that, the young man from Alton with the news.
How's it going, everybody? Name's Dennis. All right. Oh, actually, before we get going here, Ben, I noticed something on your thing here. Hold on. You got the buttermilk thing, but it needs to be facing this way.
I see.
For those wondering,
Yeah.
give me your mic. For those wondering, this is buttermilk, yes, but Ben Joravsky missing. Pretty cool, right?
Yeah.
But when you don't have it turned, it just looks like we got buttermilk hanging out here. That's weird.
Not that there's anything wrong with that.
Yes,
By the way,
there
show
is.
the car. Boom, boom. And the I support musicians, CSO, but we have a few buttons and stuff there other than buttermilk. All right, young man, thank you for correcting that. Now, what's the news for the day?
All right, let's unpack some news happening in Illinois and or Chicago this afternoon. No Friday public events listed for Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker. It's a rainy Friday here in Chicago, a little after 1 p.m. Ben Joravsky, what do you think J.B. Pritzker is doing now?
On a rainy Friday?
Yeah.
After lunch?
Yeah.
He's probably taking a nap.
Oh, taking a nap, huh? Sleeping. Really?
I would be... I guess I owe you lunch. Yeah, that's...
Anything else?
No, he probably woke up by now. Up. There goes that J.B. Pritzker interview.
But we do have some statewide news to discuss. Ben Joravsky, if you could, please hand me that liquor bottle I put under your table, please.
Oh.
It's time to celebrate, buddy.
Oh, wait, I'll have to celebrate.
There you go. Please just commit to the
buttermilk.
We have to congratulate our good friend and state senator, or should I say soon-to-be former state senator, Toy Hutchinson. She's stepping down from her Senate seat. Now remember, everyone, come January 1st, 2020, recreational cannabis will be legal in the state of Illinois. And come January 1st, Toy Hutchinson will be settled into her new position. And my God, if this job title doesn't sound like the name of a stoner comedy that I would pay money to see, Toy Hutchinson is now the cannabis czar.
He could also be a wrestler.
Oh, my God. That'd be an awesome wrestler, too. A
cannabis
pot
czar,
wrestler.
yeah.
Holy crap. Hey, Ben, what's a czar?
Tsar, man, you know, the leader of Russia in the old days, the king of Russia, essentially. Yeah, Tsar. C-Z-A-R, although it can be spelled with a T, T-S-A-R, but they like to put it with the C in front of cannabis because you got that alliteration, man. Huh? I went to radio school. Tsar Cannabis, or is it Cannabis Czar? Which way did they go?
Cannabis czar.
All right, yeah, CC.
Okay, so
CC
I don't think
Ryder.
you know what a czar is. You said it's like a king or a queen?
Russia, the Russian monarchs
Okay.
were czars.
The following comes from the meanest Illinois political bulldog in the yard. Capital Facts is Richard Miller at capitalfacts.com. F-A-X like a fax machine, guys. Check it out. It's a great source for Illinois news. One of the worst kept state house secrets this week is that Senator Toy Hutchinson is resigning to oversee implementation of the new cannabis legalization law. She informed Senate President Cullerton yesterday and her law firm today. Hutchinson will oversee the activities of count 'em, five state agencies: agriculture, public health, revenue, DCEO, and the Illinois Department of Financial and Professional Regulation. She'll also have some sway over the Illinois state police's policies. Governor Pritzker had tried to recruit her into his administration earlier this year, but she declined. Senator Hutchinson told Rich Miller earlier this week that she had two big goals when she became senator. Number one, reform the state income tax code, and number two, legalize weed. She helped to do both this year and said it was time to go.
Well, you know, I'm a big fan of Toy Hutchinson. Everybody knows that. She's been on the show many times. In fact, I think she's going to come on the show next week to talk about her days as a state senator now that she's moving on. A very important job in the state of Illinois. The biggest, I think, the most of the attention will be on the revenue part of the job. You know, how can the state of Illinois make money out of the sale of reefer? But it was interesting to see her comments, Toy's comments in the paper today. She was talking about the fairness issue, the fact that so many black people over the years have been locked up for smoking marijuana, have been punished for smoking marijuana. By and large, it was legal for white people. They certainly weren't incarcerated at the same rate. So she's guaranteed to make sure that that everybody gets to enjoy the benefits of legalizing marijuana in terms of getting the contracts to sell it, et cetera, and so forth. So that'll be a big part of her job as well. So congratulations to her, and I'm bring her on and get her opinion on whether we should have the exclusion zone. Remember, we talked about that last week, the exclusion zone in the Loop. Why aren't there marijuana stores in the Loop? See what she has to say about that. But anyway, congratulations, Toy Hutchinson.
Hutchinson has served in the Senate since January of 2009. She chairs the Influential Revenue Committee. She's also the immediate past president of the National Conference of State Legislatures. She became the NCSL's president-elect 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I saw that speech she gave. It was on Instagram. Yeah, Toy Hutchinson's a big deal. And I think her ultimate place will be in the media. She's a very powerful presence. Whenever she comes on this show, that's for sure. So I always told her, you know what, Toy, your future's in the media. But apparently she's going to be running marijuana in the state of Illinois in the interim.
All right, people, we are moving on here. On to Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot.
All right, let's move on. It's time to party.
Oh, my God. There we go.
Come October, I'll address those challenges further in my budget speech.
Lori Lightfoot's Friday plans include a morning visit to the Resurrection Project to meet with community members, and then giving remarks in the evening at the Cook County Juvenile Temporary Detention Center's Foundation's, that's a long title, the Cook County Juvenile Temporary Detention Center Foundation's 10th anniversary gala. All right, so we've got some good Lori Lightfoot news and some bad. Let's begin with the good. The following comes from the Chicago Sun-Times and one Mitch Dudek. Lightfoot announces amnesty debt relief program for city sticker scofflaws. Ben, how pumped are you for this?
I am pumped. We've talked about this before. It's about time. Good going, Lori Lightfoot. You know, there was a very regressive tax. It was an unfair way to fund government, and I'm glad to see that we're moving away from it.
Residents will be allowed to buy a new city sticker with no additional fees or back charges during October, the mayor's office announced today. Mayor Lightfoot announced that beginning November 15th, everyone who is in compliance with their city sticker by October 31st will be eligible to have some or all of their city sticker tickets forgiven. It's a new day in Chicago, and we're going to make sure that every single person gets a fair shot at economic opportunity, says the mayor. Ben, before we move on here, your thoughts?
Well, as I just got finished saying, this was a legacy, a remnant of the Rahm days. It was very unfair. The city is always looking for ways to make more money to pay its basic bills. So this is essentially squeezing the people who can at least afford to pay by taking away their cars. And I never understood, this was in conjunction with like the red light cameras. It's just a crackdown on just everyday citizens in the city of Chicago, as opposed to exploring more progressive ways to finance government. I never understood why Mayor Rahm and the aldermen would tolerate it, but the city was definitely in a different place back then for the last 8 years. So it's good to see Lori Lightfoot is getting rid of it and reforming it. One of the first acts as mayor.
All right. For more information and to sign up for the debt forgiveness, visit www.chicago.gov/city sticker debt relief. All right. And now the bad news. All signs are, in fact, pointing to a Chicago teachers union strike. In a massive show of unity, the Chicago teachers and support staff voted late Thursday in favor of a walkout. Union officials put the vote at 94% in favor of authorizing a strike. Now, if you're new to Chicago politics, this CTU vote does not mean that they are officially on strike. The union can now announce a walkout date with 10 days' notice. The union's 700-member House of Delegates could vote on a proposed strike day at its next meeting October 2nd, which covers the education beat full-time. Well, that is from Chalkbeat. This comes from Chalkbeat. The earliest a strike could occur is October 7th. Mayor Lightfoot, who said a walkout would be catastrophic, joined Chicago Public Schools CEO Janice Jackson and stated that, quote, that they are committed to doing everything we can to finalize a deal that is sustainable for all Chicagoans and for our city's future, that respects our teachers and continues our students' record-breaking success for years to come. Ben Joravsky, give us your forecast here. Can a deal be reached by October 7th?
Yes, a deal can be reached by October 7th. don't know if a deal will be reached by October 7th. I was really wrong the last time we had a big time strike in Chicago. That would have been 2012, where I was going around predicting there would not be a strike, because back then, if you recall, we were in the middle of Barack Obama's re-election campaign, and I had this feeling there was no way that Barack Obama's campaign would allow his former White House chief of staff, Mayor Rahm, to oversee a teacher strike on the eve of the re-election run. Boy, was I wrong. That strike was lasted, what was it, 8 days, 7 days, something like that. And in the end, the teachers and Rahm cut a deal. So I was wrong in that one. I would think that they could cut a deal here. The big issue in this particular standoff it seems to me, has to do with jobs, much the same way we talked about with the nurses at University of Chicago and the the teachers want guarantees in the contract. They wanted in their contract that certain what they call wraparound service jobs be protected by union contracts. So you're talking about librarians, social workers, nurses, etc. And I would think that Lori Lightfoot would want to be viewed as the great champion for correcting these shortages. These shortages, it's a shame on the city of Chicago that we've had these shortages for so years. So many of our educators who come on this show, we talk about how there's more kids per nurse in the city of Chicago than any district in the state of Illinois, or it's one of the worst in the state of Illinois. And so I would think that Lori Lightfoot would want to be the mayor who said, I was the one who ended this inequity. So it would be, in my humble opinion, in her political best interest to take the lead on this. But so far, she's been reluctant to put it in the contract, and that seems to be where the standoff is. So I think, to answer your question, there's plenty of room for them to cut a deal. Not so sure that they'll get it done.
All right, everybody, so that's what's going on locally. Feel free to weigh in on the YouTube live stream chat with your thoughts, or on the Ben Joravsky Show Facebook page. Speaking of the Ben Joravsky Show Facebook page, right now I am posting your latest work on the Chicago Reader, Ben. This article, it looks like you were inspired by our weekend bonus interview last week with one Robert Herethe, because this week's Chicago Reader article titled The Herethe Files.
Yes.
Tell us all about it.
Well, I had a lot of fun with this. Okay, Bob Herethe was on the show. He's a Sun-Times investigative reporter. Had a lot of fun with this article in many ways. And Herethe has taken it upon himself. I say it's like his hobby. And he has been soliciting files from the FBI on people who have died, prominent Chicagoans, infamous Chicagoans and famous Chicagoans. So he's got gangsters, mobsters, street gang leaders, and then he's got prominent politicians like former Mayor Richard J. Daley, former Alderman Leon Dupre. He's got writers, Mike Royko, Studs Terkel, Ernest Hemingway is in there as well. So he's gathered all of these files, and each time he talks about this in the bonus interview. It's not that easy. It's not that simple. It's just not a matter of routinely asking for a file. You have to send an official FOIA. You have to Freedom of Information Act request. And then in some cases, some bureaucrat at the FBI responds by saying, well, are you sure this person's dead? So then you have to establish that the person is dead, which is kind of a bizarre thing to do. It's like someone was born in 1895. You figure they would have passed. Anyway, so he's been gathering, I think he's 125, maybe there's more by now, 125 files, which he dutifully puts on the internet. You can find it right here at the Chicago Sun-Times. And so after he was done with our interview and talking about this hobby of his, I then spent way too much time. I was just talking to Brian about this, way too much time over the weekend plowing through the site and looking at all these files. And I have to tell you, folks, if you're going to do this, I'm going to warn you, it's a PDF file, and so it's just pictures, images of the documents themselves. So you're looking on your screen, and there's a lot of redacted information. There's a lot of empty pages. So, you just constantly are getting the going after one page after one page. And after a while, it's like I started getting car sick a little bit. I'd have to take a break from it. But then, I'd take a break and I'd be curious. I'd come back. Why was the FBI spying, let's say, on Ernest Hemingway? Why were they collecting a file on Mike Royko or Studs Terkel or Leon Dupre? And in many cases, I don't even know if spying is the best word to use. And in some cases, for instance, like Mike Royko's case, what happened is that somebody threatened Royko. Mike Royko, by the way, for you youngsters, was probably the greatest columnist who ever worked in the city of Chicago. He died in, I think, 1997. He worked for the Sun-Times, the Daily News, and the Tribune. But anyway, he was the greatest columnist who, in my humble opinion, whoever came out of the city of Chicago. Anyway, so what happened was that Royko wrote something controversial, and a reader sent in a death threat or made some kind of threat, and the newspaper turned it over to the FBI, and the FBI did an investigation, and that opened up a file. And once the file is open, anything having to do with Mike Royko is put in that file. And so then, fast forward, someone read a Mike Royko column in 1969 where Royko was criticizing the FBI, and so this person wrote a fan letter to J. Edgar Hoover, the head of the FBI himself. Saying, I think you ought to see this column. It's like he was a tattletale on Mike Royko. And then the letter goes on to say, by the way, I really admire you. You're wonderful. Could you send me a autographed photo? He's making this request of J. Edgar Hoover that I would like to put over my fireplace. And then, so then you have in the file, a copy of J. Edgar Hoover's response. Thank you for sending this to me. I am sending you the autographed photo that you requested, et cetera, and so forth. This is the stuff that gathers in a file. And there's no evidence in the Mike Royko file that the FBI was listening to Royko's phones or reading his mail or anything like that. But it was as though, somebody's watching. Somebody's collecting the information. The information is stashed away. The question I asked is this all the information, let's say, on someone like Mike Royko? I don't know the answer to that question. It's the only information that they turned over to Bob Hergus, or are they leaving out goodies like that show that they were spying on him? I don't know. There's a part of me that thinks they are. I have no proof of that, but I'm just a suspicious guy. And then in other instances, like for instance, in the case of Studs Terkel, the famous writer and activist, Studs was very much an activist promoting integration way back before it was fashionable or popular. I don't know if it ever has been fashionable or popular. We're talking about in the 40s and the 50s, etc. And he's been active in the anti-war movement when he was alive, of course. And so there would be informants at various meetings where Studs Terkel spoke. And so part of the files, part of the reports in his files would be reports based on the intel of these informants who would say Studs Terkel, so the FBI agent would write, our informant said that Studs Terkel spoke, and they would quote a little bit about him. So there's evidence that the FBI was actively spying, if you will, on activists in the city of Chicago. So it's sort of a mixed bag. It's an interesting combination of this, that, and the other thing. And very clearly, the FBI was paying attention, to put it mildly, with what Chicago's left was up to. And so that in the case of Studs Terkel, they were following him. And the thing on Ernest Hemingway was pretty funny. Ernest Hemingway wanted to be an FBI informant. This was back in the 40s when he was living in Cuba. He wanted to be an FBI informant and tell the FBI what he claimed he saw a German submarine off the coast of Havana or something, and he was worried that the Germans were about to invade the United States or send in some kind of infiltrators or spies to the United States. And so he was warning the FBI of this, and the FBI was skeptical about his information. They didn't trust him. So it was a funny thing. Here's the FBI spying on people, and then when someone wants to spy on their behalf, they don't know if they trust them. So a little hodgepodge of information in Bob Hergus' FBI files. I saw somewhere, I think he just added a new name. This is after I read through. I can't remember. I think I saw it in the paper today. So he's continually updating the files, and I'll probably let a couple weeks go by and take another deep dive.
Once again, it's the Herethe Files, Ben Joravsky's latest article in the Chicago Reader. Check it out now, chicagoreader.com. It's also on our Facebook page, at Benny J Show, BENNY, the letter J Show, as well as our Twitter page with the same handle. Rummana Hussain is in studio. Coming up next, we're going to be doing the Rummana Rundown. Don't go anywhere. It's the Ben Joravsky Show, live from the Chicago Sun-Times. the Chicago Reader to get up to speed on what's what in Chicago. Culture, food, arts and entertainment, weekly concert listings, weekly event listings, the environment, travel. I can continue, but you get the point. And for all of you Chicago political junkies, raw weekly columns on real city politics from Maya Dukmasova and our very own Ben Joravsky. The Chicago Reader, free to the public in newsstands throughout the city and online at chicagoreader.com. Read it now and be a more informed Chicagoan. Attention Chicago innovators and creators, 2019 Chicago Ideas Week is coming soon. October 12th through the 17th, this annual Ideas Festival is back, and it's the largest, most affordable Ideas Festival of its kind. They bring in hundreds of thought leaders from around the globe and some local to share ideas and spark action all across Chicago. To get a better idea of what to expect, here's a bit of audio from last year's Chicago Ideas Week with special guest and Chicago comedian Cameron Esposito.
Everything that I have ever tried to do has had two motivations. One is I really do believe in trying to create social change, and then the other one is I'm scared and alone too, so I would like for you to join me. You know, every job that I have, I try to make sure to hold the door open. That's like my motto for like if I get through, you're coming with me, and I believe in that wholeheartedly, and especially if I have more privilege than you, like I'm holding the door open for you even wider.
October 12th through the 17th, it's 2019 Chicago Ideas Week. Tickets go on sale to members on August 22nd and to general public September 10th. Once again, if you're an innovator or creator in the city of Chicago or even outside the city, you must join us for Chicago Ideas Week, October 12th through the 17th. For tickets and event information, head to chicagoideas.com. That's chicagoideas.com, and we hope to see you October 12th through the 17th for 2019 Chicago Ideas Week. Hey, podcast fans, that's you, the people listening to this podcast. The team at the Chicago Sun-Times have a new show to add to your listening lineup. This football season, get the inside scoop on the Chicago Bears with Hallis Intrigue. It's the latest podcast from the Chicago Sun-Times, and boy, it is all things Chicago Bears. Tune in to hear Sun-Times sports reporters and Bears experts, a ton of them, as they will keep you informed this football season. Listen to Hallis Intrigue at suntimes.com/Hallis. That's suntimes.com/HALAS. And be sure to subscribe so that you never miss an episode. Check it out now, suntimes.com/Hallis. Welcome back to the Ben Joravsky Show, live from the Chicago Sun-Times.
Rummana Hussain in the studio. It's the Rummana Rundown every Friday on our show. Rummana, so many things to talk about. Let's start with Whistleblower Gate. And I thought you would be a perfect person to run this by. We've been talking about Whistleblower Gate for the last 3 days. Just people who are just do not know it, by and large, or you should know it, but whatever. The unnamed whistleblower, at least as of yet, he's been unnamed, or she. Apparently, it's a CIA analyst who works in the White House and got wind of the fact that Donald Trump was on the phone with the president of Ukraine, in which Donald Trump was saying, hey, essentially, we do things for you, so you should do things for us. And one of the things we do for you, he didn't say it, but it was veiled in there, was we give you $400 million in military aid. And one of the things you can do for us is to look into Joe Biden and see if there's any truth to the fact that he and his son were up to no good in the Ukraine. In other words, he was digging for dirt. With a foreign leader, trying to get a foreign leader to do the dirty work for the Republican Party, digging up dirt on an opponent, like he hadn't learned from 2016. He got in trouble. Same thing with Hillary and the Russians. Anyway, bottom line, of course, now we're talking impeachment. And my question for you, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this one, is I want to know, like, how does that fit in with the behavior of people who've really been punished? And there's two people I can think of right now. One who's the subject of an investigation, we'll get to her, Kim Foxx, for Jussie Smollett-gate. But let's talk about Blago. I'm trying to figure out, Governor Blago is now spending, I think he's
14
years. So he's got, forget how many years are left on his sentence. I don't even know if he made the calls himself it seems to me that Donald Trump was a lot more blatant. You could say it's sort of a shakedown, extortion, if you will, than Blago ever was. What's your thoughts on all this?
Yeah, I think it's pretty interesting. And first of all, you know how you called it the Ukraine? I read somewhere that's Ukraine now.
Oh, did I say the
yeah,
UK?
Yeah, I don't know, but I think it's just a habit.
It's a habit everyone has.
And
but you're right. We should just say Ukraine.
My cousin was married to a former Ukrainian woman, so I learned a little Russian.
You're right. I'm looking it up in the paper.
Yeah.
It's no the.
It's no the. But anyway, I just think it's Donald Trump has done many things. I think a lot of people would say, is this really surprising that this happened? But I guess in this case, it's like Blagojevich was talking to a lot of people. I mean, we have the recordings that the Tribune had. You remember that with Pritzker talking about it. And
absolutely. Do I remember? Oh my goodness. We talked about that for a long time.
It's definitely something that was unethical and criminal. With Donald Trump, he's using a foreign power to investigate someone, and he also offered. Didn't he also offer the services of Rudy Giuliani and William Barr?
Yes.
It's shocking, but then again, part of me is like, is anybody really shocked? I don't know. I think it's definitely something that needs to be investigated. What will happen? That's the question. I mean, people are calling for impeachment hearings, but what does being impeached mean? Does it mean he'll be in office? I don't know. Obviously this seems, for people who are following what Donald Trump has been doing the last few years since he's been in office, I don't think should be a shocker to people, but I still think it is in a way. It's like, God, just when you thought things couldn't get crazier, it gets crazier. So I don't know. I think it's definitely if this is what happened, I think it's something that needs to be looked into. Will Donald Trump be the first president to be impeached and removed from office? I don't know.
No, I can guarantee you.
We'll be talking. He won't be. He won't be. Me and my some of my family members are talking about it. Well, by the time the impeachment hearings take place, it was like term will be gone.
Well, we're going to be. Talking about that later with Meredith Shiner, a political analyst. We're going more into detail about the schedule and how it election cycle, et cetera, and so forth, and what the Republicans are going to do and all that. But the thing that intrigued me from the local level and is the way in which we've become so partisan in our reactions to what goes on in events. And so you think that in the abstract, there would be behavior by a politician that Democrats and Republicans could come together and say, this is outrageous. And that happened with Blagojevich. Democrats and Republicans together, they ran him out of office so fast.
Well, it doesn't seem like that's happening in the White House.
No. There's two reactions, a Republican reaction and a Democratic reaction.
And that's what, it just makes me, I always keep thinking, like if Barack Obama did this, would the reaction from the Republicans be the same? I mean, I don't know if you're on Twitter a lot, but Lindsey Graham was trending a couple of days ago, and I think he was just kind of blowing this off. And then I think people were tweeting what he said when the impeachment hearings of Bill Clinton were taking place, and he's like, you don't even have to perform a criminal act to be impeached, and he was getting all like vociferous about it. So it's just very interesting. And I grew up. I mean, I kind of came of age in the 80s, and I just remember thinking everybody was so anti-Soviet Union, and especially the Republicans. My one of my uncles, my maternal uncles in India, is a communist, so I never thought communism was that big of a deal growing up, because I was like, I didn't think it was a bad word necessarily, because it was one of my favorite uncles. But
wow, times have changed that you would feel free to say that. And back in the 80s, nobody would say, "Oh, my uncle is a communist."
He's a very proud communist. He has like the flag, and he always says he has to wear red, like a piece of like material that is red. I mean, I've had arguments with him because I don't necessarily think communism works, but I don't think it's a dirty word, I guess. Yeah. So I remember growing up and watching movies like Rambo and other movies that had, the evil people were the people from the Soviet Union. So I just think it's really interesting that, the right wingers were the ones that were just ripping on, Soviet Union the most. And now it's like, oh, yeah, whatever. Who cares? He asked for the help from Ukrainians, whatever, who
Yeah,
cares? And it's like, doesn't it make anybody think like, okay, so he went to a foreign power to look into a political opponent? That's just really bizarre.
Second time around. And
Yeah,
the
I know,
same
I
neck
know,
of the
I know.
woods, second time around.
I know.
And it was funny.
Can he
because
go to a different country? I don't know.
I have a lot of fun reading, as you know, the Tribune's editorial page. And so what got me thinking of the obvious contracts, they've now weighed in twice. I've read them both. And I think I should get like extra pay for having read the Tribune's editorial on this. But their attitude was, it's wrong. What he did was wrong, but they could find nothing in there, no evidence of a quid pro quo. So in other words, it wasn't explicit. He didn't say, all right, you want that $450 million? I'll give you the $450 if you do the investigation. He suggested it. So I just find that.
It's just that it's kind of like Bill Clinton arguing about the word is.
Yeah, so I just find it interesting that
No,
they're so liberal minded and they needed more proof with this. I don't believe Blago ever personally got on a phone and said, you want that state contract? You got to give me XYZ. I don't believe they ever got Blago saying that. And yet, just imagine the Tribune. Just imagine if Blago had made this phone call or Madigan had made this phone call with the Tribune's reaction. So that's what I'm saying. I just feel as though our country has lost sense of like judging right and wrong.
No, it's true. And you know, you mentioned Kim Fox.
Yes.
And that's similar with Kim Fox too. I mean, I don't, you know, there's people who don't like her on the right, and then there's people who love her on the left, and the people on the left don't. They're like, oh, okay, who cares? You know, with the smaller thing. I'm not saying everybody. I shouldn't say everybody on the left, but there are people. I have heard people on the left say, you know, there's bigger deals, and nobody's saying that's not a big deal. It's about the integrity of the office. It has nothing to do with the Smollett case itself, which I think gets lost in some of the arguments. And then there's people way to the right, and then, you know, there's the FOP where, you know, they don't like anything that she does. So this is just a chance for them to kind of jump up from what I've seen.
Absolutely. I did want to make this clear. I do not equate what Kim Fox may or may not have done
not
on
to
a
what Donald
relatively
Trump
minor case
or Blagojevich.
to Donald Trump. But your point is very well taken. It's like the response, the response to Kim Fox that this is an outrage, must be being investigated. People are already running against her. This is a sign that she's not. She should no longer be our state's attorney. I'm like, where's the outrage about Donald Trump?
Well, it's kind of like you and Rahm, I guess.
I love Rahm.
I
love Rahm. What do you mean?
I'm just saying, like, if Rahm did something, would you treat Lori the same way if she did the same thing?
Good question.
That's what I'm just saying. I'm just saying when people have a distrust for someone, then I think I'm an equal opportunist.
Yes, and actually, it was funny. We had to interview yesterday. Dan Savage was on the show yesterday.
Oh yeah, I saw that.
And he's from Chicago, but he doesn't live in Chicago.
His dad's a cop. Was a cop.
Yeah, I think, did he mention that, Dee, that his dad was a cop? It was a very interesting. He talked about his mom a lot and his upbringing.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I asked him about Rahm. What's his thoughts on Rahm? Now, Dan Savage has lived in Seattle for, I don't know, the last 20 years at least. So he hasn't been here for Rahm. And so he was just looking as an outsider. And his immediate reaction to Rahm, without having followed what's gone on, is that he appreciates the toughness that Rahm has. He wishes more Democrats were like that. And my attitude toward that is, I agree with you. I wish more Democrats were tough like Rahm. I wish Rahm, however, wouldn't apply his toughness to other Democrats, would apply it more to Republicans. That's my problem with Rahm. But yeah, no, you make a good point. We all kind of bring our attitudes.
And maybe, you know, I'm trying to say that I'm so fair. Maybe I'm like that too, and that's human nature.
Oh my God, maybe
it's human nature, I guess.
Oh my God. All right, let's give a test to that. Let's talk about President Modi's appearance in Houston.
God. I told our politics desk about that, and it was kind of like yawn. But no, Lynn Sweet did call me, and she told me she was surprised that Raja Krishnamurthy was there. I was looking at pictures, and I saw that Danny Davis was there as well. For people who don't know who Narendra Modi is, he is the Prime Minister of India, but he used to be this. He used to be the head of. He used to rule things in the state of Gujarat. I forgot what his. I don't know. I don't want to. He was the head guy in Gujarat when the massacres happened. I think it was early 2000s, and there was riots, communal tension, and
Talk about the massacres. A lot of people
the massacres.
Don't know what you're talking about.
There was India is a majority Hindu country, and there's many minorities in the country as well. There's 1 billion people in India, so a lot of people forget that there's still, even though India, when India. The independence, Pakistan became its own country, Bangladesh became its own country. Pakistan and Bangladesh are Muslim majority countries. There's a lot of bloodshed, but people don't realize that there was a lot of Muslims that stayed back. So Muslims are the largest minority in India. And then there's been a rise of nationalism in India, which is becoming very, very anti-Muslim. Hindus revere the cow. Muslims are meat eaters. So now people who are suspected of even eating beef, a lot of them are getting lynched across the country. And so people feel like Modi. So there's been communal tension that flares up every so often. People get along. I mean, my mom grew up with mostly Hindu friends. My communist uncle that I mentioned, his friends are all Hindu. All the politicians in town where he lives. But anyway, there's once in a while communal tension takes place. So there was what happened was there was these riots that started after, I think there were some Muslims that killed some Hindus on a train. I believe it was some sort of train incident. But then there's a retaliation for that, and a lot of Muslims were killed. And Modi, who was the head of Gujarat at the time, the allegations are that he turned his cheek and didn't really care, and kind of told cops to turn around and not pay attention. So he was banned from coming to the United States for years until Donald Trump came into office. And so a lot of people compare what's happening in India. The rhetoric that's happening in India is the same as the rhetoric that's happening in the United States, especially against Muslims. So anyway, in Houston, Modi came for a rally, which we were just talking about. Raja Krishnamurthy was there. Danny Davis was there. And the guest star was Donald Trump.
They walked hand in hand.
Yes. And I heard, I don't know if this is true, I saw it on Twitter, that they showed a picture of Martin Luther King and Gandhi while these two were talking, to say that, these kind of comparing the leaders to this. But, I told you about Patriot Act, right? Mm-hmm. Hussain Minhaj's show. So this guy has had shows on India where he talks about, Hussain Minhaj is a Muslim of Indian descent. So he's talked about Modi before and been critical of Modi. So he was there to cover the event, and they told him there's no room for him. And it was because he criticized Modi. So he had to watch it in the parking lot with the 15,000 or so protesters. But he said, the funny thing was, I saw him talking on a late night show, and he said that, they're talking about all the Indian Americans who've gained prominence in the last few years. And he goes, we even have comedians. And he said they flashed a picture of him. So it's like they wouldn't let him in there, but they were using him to show how well Indian Americans are doing. So it's pretty interesting, because there's definitely a lot of tension in India right now. And it's something that I pay attention to because this is where my parents are from, and it's where I go. I've been to India. I've actually been to India like right after horrible things have happened. In '93, there was a mosque that was destroyed, and there was a lot of riots then. Mostly they happened in Mumbai. I was there a few weeks later. And then when the terrorist attacks happened in 2008, I was in India a few weeks later too. So I've kind of watched the rhetoric change, and people saying things, and I voraciously read India press too. So
how has the rhetoric changed?
There's definitely a lot of people who are left wing. The media is very critical of Modi, but you see it. You've seen people talk openly about how they feel about minorities in India, and most of the minorities in India, there's Sikhs, there's Christians, there's different religious groups. They're not happy with Modi, so there's just kind of been a push back. Even changing names. I mean, Muslims have been in India for a long time, so there's a feeling where, I don't know if there's this one state where they told, a lot of the Muslims who are there, they're saying that they're not from there, they're immigrants, and they've actually started these little campgrounds. So there's been a lot of news stories about it. I've been reading, you've been hearing about Kashmir. Kashmir is Actually, it's the only state in India that's Muslim majority. So they got rid of their special status, and India and Pakistan have been fighting over that country for a long time. And of course, there's a lot of depending on where you're coming from, but a lot of things aren't being covered there right now. People are being kept from there, and so it's just an interesting time in India, and it's interesting that Modi came here. There were a lot of protesters outside the stadium, including a family friend of mine.
Yeah.
But I just think it's interesting that Raja Krishnamurthy went as a Democrat, Indian American, and then Danny Davis. I don't know what the thinking is there, but it's just interesting. I'm just saying that if there was, let's say, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, let's say he came to the United States and the president cozied up to him, I'm sure there would have been a lot more uproar. But I just feel like nobody really thinks that this is that important.
Well,
it's not. I don't think people realize how offensive it is to some Indian Americans. Not all.
Yeah, I anything Ram or any mayor of Chicago did to what's happening in India in terms of Modi and what's happening in Kashmir and all that. But I'm saying I agree with this basic point. The closer you are to a particular issue,
of course,
the more important it becomes, and the further away you are from that issue, the less relevant it becomes. And so people are constantly saying to me, with my obsessions, I talk about this with other reporters
like
all the time.
Or something, or politics.
Why do you care? What do you care? Because they're not in on it.
Yeah.
And when I look what's considered normal in American politics, this very controversial prime minister from India who's involved in, to put it mildly, very controversial policies.
People say they accuse him of ethnic cleansing.
We're at least you could say you're heading in that direction.
Mm-hmm.
It's very scary. It's very frightening. The whole relationship between Pakistan and India, these are two countries that have nuclear weapons, and every now and then there's a flare up at the Kashmir, and it's buried in page 10 of maybe the New York Times. There may be a paragraph in the Sun Times and the Tribune. So this is really an important issue, but to most Americans, it's is irrelevant as a TIF deal. You know what I mean? What do you care?
I know, but the thing is, I'm just saying, if it was another leader from another country
I agree with you.
that did something to minority groups, was rude to, was not rude, but was treating Christians differently. I just feel like sometimes Americans can be very selective of who they, even the people on the left, do they even care? You know what I mean? It's like it's just like yawn.
Yeah.
So I just find it interesting.
No,
and I'm obviously very close to it, so I am going to feel very strongly about it. But I just feel like if it was another leader, if it was a Muslim leader that was treating Christians terribly or Jewish people terribly, I think this would be front page news.
I agree, and this gets to the larger point, which is that it seems as though we've lost objective standard for right and wrong, and it's a variance. Like if you have personal knowledge or you have relatives that are affected, understand it and you're aware of it.
Yeah.
If you're on the side of the president, it doesn't matter. If you're against Blagojevich, it really matters. There's no objective. It's not like anybody
and I'm not saying I'm very close to it. So I just think it's interesting. I think it is relevant. I think Raja Krishnamurthy, I think his base is pretty. There's a large Indian population, and obviously not everybody agrees on this because that Modi event was sold out. It was like 50,000 people. And so, he does have his fans.
Yeah. And the fact that Trump was there raises the whole possibility of is our Indian Americans going to vote for Donald Trump because he showed up for this rally? And then you get into the issues of the splits within Indian American community.
Yeah. And it's definitely split. And most Indians are Democrats, actually.
I know. But Trump was bragging, this is going to bring over
I told you, he has a lot of South Asian. I think the South Asians of any minority group, they're the largest representative. And I was telling that to Lynn Sweet that day, and she's like, well, they're on his cabinet. I go, a lot of people that are South Asian work for Trump. And they're not Muslim, but he might have. I think there was a group called Muslims for Trump, so it's not like there aren't any, and they're mostly South Asians. But you never. It's just a very interesting time, and the South Asian diaspora is very interesting, and I think people don't realize that one of my editors in the newsroom thinks that if World War III happens, it's going to happen in that region. So if there's going to be any tension.
That's a very real possibility.
I know.
I don't want to alarm anybody, but yeah, like I said, these stories that are buried in the back of the pages talking about two countries flying planes over each. This, there's a no-flight zone, and if you go across it, we're going to shoot your plane down. I mean, it's happening out in real time.
And a lot of Muslim Indians. We have relatives in Pakistan too. I've been to both countries. I like both countries, and it's not like I dislike India. It's like I have an attachment to it because that's where my parents are from.
Yeah,
and I go often.
I'm always urging you to write columns, and then I urge you to specific. This is a topic that I would really love to see you take a deep dive on, because I think people really in this country do need to have some basic understanding of what's going on and the possible consequences. And then maybe there'll be a little more fallout when elected officials just rally behind them. At least they have to be accountable and explain why they're doing what they're doing. By the way, Hussain Minhaj, the comedian that you were just alluding to, he, just for the record, let me know, he's been very critical of Muslim countries too.
Yeah,
his bid on Saudi Arabia is recommended.
And most non-Muslims don't realize is that most Muslims don't like Saudi Arabia. We don't like the leadership there. We go there because you have to do their pilgrimage, the Hajj. But we've all had family friends who worked in Saudi Arabia. Like a lot of I had two family friends who I grew up in the United States. They, in the 80s, they were recruiting a lot of people. So their dads were professors there in the schools. And I just like, he's gone after Saudi Arabia, and everything that he said, we knew. Just we're allies. The United States is allies with Saudi Arabia, so we don't say anything. So I was actually talking to Mick the other day, my husband, that when we're talking about Iran and Saudi Arabia, I've been to both countries. I would take Iran over Saudi Arabia in a heartbeat.
All right. By the way, we're coming to the recommendation part of the show, and so since you mentioned Mick, I'll give my recommendation first. A shameless pitch for Tuesday's first Tuesday show, October 1st. We're going to have two aldermen on, Alderwoman Jeanette Taylor, I should say, and Alderman Matt Martin. We're going to take apart the budget. Should be a lot of fun. I know Mick's excited about the show. And so that's my pitch. And also, this is the weekend. I'm going to see, I couldn't see it last week because I went to a wedding. Hustler, the J-Lo. She just saw she's going to be performing.
Yeah, but that was old news.
Oh, was it?
The new news was that Shakira, I pronounced it Shakira. Yeah, it was Shakira.
Oh,
that's how I pronounced it.
So they knew J-Lo was going to be there?
Yeah, that was old. That's old.
My beloved bright one today. I was so excited.
That's because they mentioned, it was going to be a double.
A double whammy.
Yeah, so.
Anyway, all right, well, I was excited.
She showed up in her, remember the dress that she wore that became really famous?
Which one?
It was the one that when she...
No, which person showed up?
This is Jennifer Lopez.
Oh, okay, yeah. Okay.
The green dress. You don't remember?
Yeah, I remember the green dress.
But anyway, she wore something similar to that at a fashion show in Paris, and she looked really good. But anyway,
so
I do want to watch it. I do want to watch it. Have you started watching Unbelievable yet?
No, I've not. But you've been recommending that one.
No, I started watching. I started watching that, and it's really good. It's really sad, but it's very good. And it's based on a ProPublica story about a rape case. It's a very sad story, but it's done very well. And I think the reporter and the first victim that they focus on, she thought it was very realistic and portrayed what she was feeling and what exactly happened. So my recommendation this week is it's something more serious, not the Hustlers, but it's a podcast by one of my colleagues, Frank Main. It's called Motive. It's based on the life and story of Thaddeus Jimenez, who was the youngest man to be convicted and exonerated of a murder. He was exonerated in 2009, or at least the charges were dropped in 2009 or 2008, 2009 when I started working at the criminal courthouse. So I covered this case. So that's why it was extra interesting to me. And then maybe like a year later, there's every day there's bond court, there's central bond court, and then there's felony, there's branch 66, which is all the murder and rape cases. And the other bond court is all the other felonies that aren't murders and rapes. Sometimes I would just look at the names, and I remember like months or a year later, I see his name on there. And so this kid basically, is cleared of a crime when he was, I think he was in his 20s when he came out. He was 13 when he was convicted.
He was convicted
13.
at age 13 and sentenced.
Sentenced to 45 years. So I was listening to Frank's, the second part of the podcast started. It's with WBZ, and it's called Motive, if I hadn't mentioned. But this Thaddeus Jimenez is right now serving a couple years in federal prison for shooting a guy in the legs because he got a $25 million settlement. You know,
So he was convicted at age 13, sentenced, and
for 45 years. And he was actually, he was actually sentenced to 50 years. So it was Frank's podcast, this week's episode, which actually came out today. He interviews the mom, and the mom was just so heartbroken during the sentencing phase that the judge actually took sympathy and cut the sentence by 5 years and gave him 45 years. So he gets out of prison, gets in trouble. He used to be part of this gang called the Simon City Royals, and then he's starting to restart this gang. He has $25 million. He would pay these guys to, join the gang. And, when he shot this guy in 2015, I believe, he shot him in the legs out of this, really nice Mercedes. And Ave Maria was playing the opera while this is all happening. So it's a very, very interesting podcast because it goes into this guy was wrongfully convicted. Then, is the $25 million really going to help him? Or it's just it's an interesting case study. And the last week's episode, I think Frank, from what I remember, he talks to the guy that was injured. And then he talks to some people that were involved in his life, including his attorney. And this week, he kind of talks to the mom and the life he had before he joined a gang and, the story of his mom. And she was like this struggling single woman. So I think it's pretty interesting. I don't know if you followed the case at all.
I followed the case from afar. Obviously, I never interviewed the young man and I never wrote about it. But I read, the Sun-Times has been writing about this for a long time. It seems like forever.
Yeah. And then you remember the infamous 2017,
the shooting.
Strip club.
It was funny. I think I would remember the strip. I remember the shooting while Ave Maria's playing, and because that was the Sun-Times may have put that on the internet. The video of it. But I remember that just the stories about the sad story about his incarceration at a very young age, as though a life had just been utterly wasted, and then he gets this second chance. Excuse me. He gets who in life, Rummana, gets a second chance, and he gets a second chance with $25 million of our taxpayers' dollars, whatever. And then he can't help himself, and he goes right back to
that life.
And
I remember covering one of his, I just sitting in a drug case when, after he got this $25 million settlement, and he was sitting there with his family, and I was outside, and he had this really nice watch. I just looked at it and I'm like, oh God, that's probably a $50,000 watch. I can just tell right now. And it's actually a pretty sad story. And I think Frank does a really good job. I mean, I've been talking to Frank while he was working on this podcast because he's been doing that for the last couple months. So I was curious. And because I actually interviewed Thaddeus and I interviewed the mom when he was exonerated, it's just fascinating.
Wait, so I'm sorry, you interviewed the mom. Did you interview Thaddeus, did you say?
Yeah, because they just cleared him of murder charges. And so I was at 26 in California. I was assigned there. So he had a whole press conference. So I remember talking to him and the mom. So it's just interesting.
Was he humble?
Yeah, he seemed humble. And that's when you listen to the podcast, a lot of the attorneys, I mean, obviously this is only part 2, but everybody was saying when they were talking to him, he seemed like a pretty intelligent guy. It's just, and then, it's just interesting because he grew up in Avondale, which is the hip neighborhood now. And they just said it was really rough in 91. I probably never went there, when I was a young college student, but it's just interesting how the neighborhood changes, just hearing them talk about how tough it was at that time. And now it's this trendy area where, that's up and, it's going towards gentrification if it hasn't already.
A trendy north side neighborhood. And Avondale. Yeah, I'm definitely going to, in fact, I'll probably have to watch it because I want to bring Frank on the show, do a bonus. So I'll have to listen to it.
I think, and they're not long podcasts. They're half-hour podcasts, and I think they're done pretty well.
And as long as I have you in here, we're talking about criminal justice cases at the at California. Tyshawn Lee, we've talked about that a lot.
Yeah.
This is one of the saddest stories.
Yeah, the Tyshawn Lee was a 9-year-old boy who was shot execution style. He was playing basketball at a park, and the alleged gunman lured him away, telling him, "Oh, let's play basketball. I'll get you some candy at a corner store." And he gets shot in the head. And apparently, this was in retaliation for a shooting that happened with a rival gang, where the mother of one of the suspects, there's 2 men on trial right now. One is D. Wright, I think it's pronounced D. Wright Boone Doty, and Corey Morgan. Corey Morgan's mother was shot and injured, and Corey Morgan's brother was killed in a shooting that happened maybe a couple weeks before Tyshawn Lee was killed. So Tyshawn Lee was killed in retaliation for that shooting, and it was like 2 gang factions, and Tyshawn's father was part of this other rival gang, and so reputedly, and so it's a very sad case. I think the trial is still going to take place next week, but there's been questions. I mean, the last couple of days, there's been people on the stand. The straw buyer was on the stand yesterday, and he talked about, it was interesting. He said, "I knew the gun wasn't going to be used for something good, but I didn't know it was going to get to this level," and that's telling in itself. It's actually very, very sad. Yeah. And just like a 9-year-old boy, you just wonder, he's just a kid playing in the park, and he told his grandma he was going to come home, and he never came home.
That story is unfolding as we speak. Rummana, thanks so much for, again, spending Friday with us. And we're going to see you in a couple hours as part of our inaugural trivia contest.
Like I said, I haven't had much sleep, so hopefully I'll be okay.
Oh, man, the showdown is ready to happen.
It'll be fun.
It'll be fun. It'll be a lot of fun. Dr. D's got a lot of tricks up his sleeve. Anyway, Rummana Hussain, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me again.
Meredith's on deck. We're going to bring her on when we return. Hey, everybody, what you're about to hear are the piano stylings of Jeff Manuel. Man, listen to Jeff go. Jeff Manuel has been playing piano around Chicago for years. He's played for conventions, for celebrities, played in basement bars with blues bands. He's played at prestigious social clubs, fine restaurants, and in the intimacy of private homes. Book Jeff Manuel at jeffemanuelpianist.com. Don't worry, I'll spell his name at the end of this commercial. You know what Chicago Magazine said? They said that Jeff Manuel is, quote, as comfortable with Chopin as he is with Cole Porter. He's excellent, and his performance is joyous. He offers an elegant stream of compositions and interpretations that entertains the mind, but won't hurt the ears. To hear more of Jeff Manuel's work and to book Jeff for your next event, go to jeffmanuelpianist.com. I'm going to spell it out for you, people. J-E-F-F. M as in Mary, A, N as in Nancy, UELPIANIST.com. Take it away, Jeff Manuel.
But we got to get down to business.
Did you know that 40% of the people in Illinois opt to be cremated? Well, it's true. And Chicagoland Cremation Options honors their wishes by providing cremation services directly to the general public. Chicagoland Cremation Options provides an affordable, ethical, and easy cremation arrangement, whether in person or online. Save thousands and streamline the process by going directly to Chicagoland Cremation Options. It's a family-owned business operated by my good friend, Douglas Klein. Here's how you reach them. ChicagolandCremationOptions.com. One more time, ChicagolandCremationOptions.com.
All right, everybody, hour number 2 of your Ben Joravsky Show for Friday, September 27th is moments away. But before we get into that, we need to thank the following unions for sponsoring this program. First up, it's the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, Local 126 and District 8. Robert Mueller, it's District 8, right?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. The International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 9, the International Union of Operating Engineers, Local 150, and our good friends at the Chicago Federation of Labor. Hour number 2, let's go. It is Friday, September 27th, and live from the Chicago Sun-Times Chicago Reader Studio on Racine Avenue, this is the Ben Joravsky Show. In this hour of the program, we're talking all things national politics with political analyst Meredith Shiner. And the Heartland Mamas are back. I repeat, the Heartland Mamas are back. Murray Briel and Heidi Henry. And now your host, Chicago Reader columnist Ben Joravsky.
The Heartland Mamas are on their way. They're whipping up the highway right now from Grundy County, kind of tell us how the Democrats can take back Trump, get back the vote in Trump County before we get the Heartland Mamas on. We got Meredith Shiner on. You might remember her from a bonus interview. It's about a month or so ago, Meredith. And I said as soon as the interview was over.
It's been 10 years in real political time, I think. But yeah, I think it's only actually been a few weeks.
It has been 10 years. The last time you were here, and let's just say Meredith covered Washington for many years for Political, Roll Call, and Yahoo News, so she knows a thing or two about Congress and White House and how they interact. The last time you were here, it seemed as though the investigation into Donald Trump's wheeling and dealing with the Russians had hit a wall, and it was uncertain if Nancy Pelosi was ever going to greenlight an impeachment inquiry, much less an impeachment vote. It seems as though Donald Trump was wandering around the world, pounding his chest, victorious.
I think he was going to do that no matter what.
Yes, he'll probably be doing that tomorrow.
Yeah, completely regardless of situation. No, so we were here a few weeks ago. It didn't look like we were close to any sort of formal impeachment inquiry. But one of the things that I've been saying this week, because people have asked me about it and what might have changed, and we can talk about the substance of what has changed. But one of the things that I like to talk about in terms of Nancy Pelosi is that in the decade that I've been following her closely, Nancy Pelosi has never held a vote that she didn't have the votes for. And so I think that when you saw Adam Schiff's letter about this whistleblower and as more details have become apparent, the second that Nancy Pelosi said she was opening the inquiry was the second that I knew that she had the votes, right? And we've seen in the past few days that more and more House Democrats have said that they support impeachment. And we can talk about the whole menu of reasons why House Democrats do at this point. But I think the big difference between last time we talked and now is that Nancy was confident that her entire caucus was going to support this on the floor. And now you're only seeing a handful of holdouts. You're seeing more than 225 House Democrats saying that they support this. And so I think in the weeks and potentially months ahead, we're going to see an investigation run out of the Intelligence Committee. I think that's intentional, right? People asked why it would be an intel when traditionally you would see this happening out of judiciary. And yes, like the Intelligence Committee is evolved because of what this whistleblower uncovered. But I also think it's because Nancy trusts Adam Schiff, who's the House Intelligence Chairman, more than she trusts Jerry Nadler at this point. And you can see by the way that this week has unfolded that Schiff really has the savvy to create the case against Donald Trump. And the media pressure I think that we're seeing this week is a result of his smarts in terms of how to create the story and how to unearth the facts.
All right, let's take it point by point. You've given us a lot, and
there's a lot in the world.
But there's a lot of good stuff to deal with. So let's start with Adam Schiff's role. To explain to people exactly who Adam Schiff is and the role he played in the unveiling of this story.
Yeah, so Adam Schiff is a member of the House from California, but most most importantly for this conversation, he is the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee. If you remember from Bob Mueller Day on Capitol Hill, there were 2 hearings that Mueller testified in front of. It was Judiciary and it was Intelligence. And the House Intelligence Committee has really been focused on the way that Russia or other countries have been interfering with our elections, right? The part of the Mueller report that was a little less salacious, right, but possibly more important in terms of the integrity of the republic, because it had to do all with the security of our elections. And so we know that that this whistleblower report has been out there for weeks. We know that one of the reasons we hadn't seen it was because the White House didn't want us to see it, and the CIA had made the unusual move of asking the White House what to do with it. Possibly Bill Barr was involved in terms of trying to keep this from getting out there. And the reason we're having this conversation today is, if you recall, several days ago, Adam Schiff put out a statement, I think, that set off all of the alarm bells and sirens for reporters, because it alluded to this whistleblower report. It alluded to really damaging information that this whistleblower had potentially divulged. And the reason you saw people digging, the reason why we're seeing stories in the Washington Post and the New York Times, is really because this statement from Adam Schiff set the ball in motion. One of the things that's been talked about today is that there are actually 2 whistleblowers. There's one who has whistleblown about the IRS and obstructing in terms of Trump's tax returns. But the chairman of that committee of jurisdiction had gone to a judge to try to force the administration to turn over documents, and has not found success in going through the legal system and getting that whistleblower report. So what Adam Schiff did, and what he was savvy enough to do, was, if I put out this statement telegraphing that this exists, I can direct reporters in the right direction. I can set off basically the administration into this crazy defensive mode, where now we see Rudy Giuliani sharing his personal texts on national television.
I
right?
missed that.
Oh my!
I missed that.
This was last night. Here's the thing: like, I don't know
Yeah.
if somehow Rudy Giuliani is the Manchurian candidate of this and bringing down the whole administration, or if he's just lost his mind. But he was sharing texts with State Department officials. He's implicating everyone and more people nightly on Fox News. So anyway, Adam Schiff is really smart. I remember when the majority flipped this past Congress, that it was really important, and it was really good that he was in this position.
Talk about the difference between him and his predecessor at intelligence before the flip of the House.
I mean, Devin Nunes, who says that liberals are trying to unearth naked pictures of Donald Trump.
Yes,
if you're going to choose a conspiracy, choose one that at least feels real. Right? No one wants to see that. No, I mean, there's a total difference, because one person is a professional and one person isn't. And it's been revealing to see Republicans talk this week. The number of Senate Republicans who said that they hadn't had a chance to read this whistleblower report. It wasn't a 400-page document. It was 9 pages. This was every time former House Speaker Paul Ryan was asked if he had seen a tweet, and he was like, I don't look at tweets. You saw it.
Yeah.
You knew. It was your job to know the political story of the day. So, these senators have seen it. They're going on this 2-week recess. And, we were sort of talking about this before the show. What will be really revealing, and what will be really important and incumbent upon House Democrats to do, is to be really intentional and deliberate about how they're unearthing information throughout this, inquiry process.
All right, now let me stop you right there.
Yeah.
Oh my God, there's been so much talk about this. One theory put out there, which I don't buy, is that somehow or other Donald Trump is this mastermind who threw out the bait. The Democrats grabbed for it to have an impeachment inquiry into something that is not going to be substantial, and the Democrats will be embarrassed. This is actually a theory that some people, Democrats, have come in. They're so paranoid. They got so much post-traumatic stress disorder, Meredith. So I don't believe that for one moment. But please entertain, entertain that notion. Is there even a possibility that could be the case?
So I'm not even going to like accept the premise of your question, because I think one of the most damaging things about the conversation about this impeachment, and I think it's still a hangover from the Bill Clinton impeachment, is that this is about politics. At the end of the day, this is about a constitutional obligation. And so even if starting this inquiry means that Donald Trump could win, first of all, he could win anyway. I mean, look at what's actually happening to our election systems. We're not passing election security bills. We have a completely defanged Voting Rights Act. So the Department of Justice, even if it wanted to act, doesn't have the tools it once did to protect voters. Like, whether or not Donald Trump wins the next election, that doesn't matter, because this process should happen because it's a constitutional obligation. It's about being on the right side of history. It's about fulfilling the duty of the office. I saw Doug Jones, who's the senator from Alabama, posted on Twitter yesterday. He said, "I wish reporters would stop asking me what I think this means for my reelection. This isn't about my election. This is about the oath of office that I have taken." Right? And Donald Trump has admitted to doing this. Yeah. Rudy Giuliani has talked about doing this. The Attorney General, who, by the way, has already provided probably ample enough reason for Congress to impeach him based on how he behaved during the Mueller report, is potentially implicated in this too. And so either you believe in the Republic and the institutions and defending them, or you don't. And that was what was so confusing, I think, about Nancy Pelosi's posture before this.
Talk about that.
Because I think she was making a political calculation, right? I think she was apprehensive too. And again, Clinton impeachment hangover maybe, that this would galvanize the right. But at the end of the day, the politics of it, that they're ancillary. It's about whether or not you believe that the legislative branch should actually be a legitimate check on an executive, whether or not it should be able to use every tool at its disposal to be able to expel a president who, by all accounts and what we know right now, has violated his oath of office and is potentially, based on his own admission, colluding with a foreign government to affect the 2020 election.
After he did it in 2016. Yeah.
So, again, I think that Nancy moved forward because she had the support of basically her entire caucus. And with this new push this week, she had no choice. Because if she didn't, there was another political calculation for her, which was that she was going to so depress the base, that Democrats were going to be so frustrated that they were doing nothing, that it would be problematic, which is not to say that people weren't going to be motivated to turn out in 2020. I think that people will be. But I think that she got to this place where there was absolutely no choice.
No,
so
there was no. And by the
did.
way, there was a danger. I do believe you're absolutely correct. There was a danger of depression setting in. And there's this, we've had this conversation to show since the last time you were here at great length, where Rahm got on ABC TV after the debates and said that the base will show up regardless. And most of the people who trot through this studio say, no, you cannot assume that your base is, you have to give them a reason. You got to get them fired up. Definitely Trump's going to be doing that on his side. And so if the Democrats just rolled over and let Trump, in the aftermath of Lewandowski's testimony, which we talked about at length in the show, and the way he just gave
Thankfully,
the middle.
I was actually really busy at my day job that day and
you're
missed
lucky
most
you
of it
missed
happening
He
live.
just basically gave the middle finger, 2 middle fingers high to the Democrats. And then so that after a while, it's just like Trump feels he can get away with anything. Trump's people feel they can get away with it. The Democrats are just going to roll over. So I do believe you're absolutely correct. I think there would have been an impact on turnout if the Democrats hadn't been vigilant at this point.
But I do really think that it's important to view this divorce from politics. But I having said that, what I will also say, and what we were talking about a little bit before I came on, was, I've seen a lot of conversation about what will happen, once the House writes the articles of impeachment, votes on it, and kicks this to the Senate, right? Because if you think about impeachment, the House is like the prosecutors, and then the court is the Senate, right? And they get to choose whether or not to vote to indict the president. And, a lot of people talked about, if we can't get a Senate vote, why would we do it in the House? One, you should put pressure on the Senate. But two, I think, you saw like Jeff Flake saying that there are 35 secret Republican votes for impeachment in the Senate, which is like nonsense. But what I will say is this, is that Mitch McConnell is smarter than most people in the administration, and he is much more calculating. And so if he makes the calculation that he thinks the prospects for the Republican Party in 2020 are better without Trump, he will do it, because all he cares about is stacking the judiciary for a lifetime, and he cares about unlimited money in politics. And so if he looks at this and he gets to a place where he makes the decision that his party is better off without Trump, the reason why they've circled for now, they've felt like there's a certain floor to where Republicans are. There's a certain unmovable base for Trump. But what we're seeing is that perceptions are starting to shift. And if House Democrats do like the impeachment inquiry correctly, if they're able to continue to unearth more and it's shared properly, I think you're going to see public sentiment shift. And if Mitch McConnell thinks that there's a significant shift in the Republican Party, I think you could actually see them act. I won't guarantee it, but I think that that's the way in which it happens.
All right, before we get to the Republicans in the Senate, let's talk about what Schiff should do or how the investigation in the House will unfold. What's your sense of how it will unfold?
So the preliminary reporting suggests that they want to get a House floor vote by Thanksgiving. So that gives us about 2 months. Wow. They're on a 2-week recess now. So, I think that there's some sense, and what's been reported to date is that they think because the president has already admitted to this, that, they don't have to have a drawn out process. Mm-hmm. But I think the more information the more information they're able to unearth, the better the case that they're making to the American people. Like, you're always going to have sort of this weird Fox News bubble where Hannity is existing in this certain place. But even now we're seeing these reports that Paul Ryan, who sits on the board for Fox News now, is secretly sort of telling Rupert Murdoch's son, who's running the company, that they should start positioning and supporting different Republicans. Yeah. So that's why I sort of indicated that maybe Mitch McConnell might shift his position. The best thing that Democrats could do is actually be methodical and deliberate and present all the facts. Like, this is different than the Clinton impeachment in the sense that the Clinton impeachment came down to one thing, right? Were you going, which side of like getting a blowjob in the Oval Office were you going to be on when like history looked back on this? Yeah. This is a little bit bigger. This is a little bit more substantial. Yeah. Like, there's more to talk about here. And like, if the president is taking all of these conversations that he's having and they're putting it in these secret servers and they can get access to what Congress can get access to all of the things that they've been hiding in this server that was designed to keep the most confidential, covert CIA activities, but now just is home to these routine calls where he is incriminating himself. Yeah. They should share that. They should make the case. They should continue to put together the case. There was a David Leonhardt opinion piece in the New York Times a few days ago. It was just like a list of 45 things that the president has done that have been like an embarrassment to the office or potentially illegal or impeachable offenses. So they should keep building on that list.
All right, now let's get back to the conversations that are embedded in this like secret safe somewhere in the White House. Yeah. They uncovered the one. His conversation with the Ukrainian president. Because
the whistleblower was able to report on it.
My guess is they'll resist turning over any others. What do you think?
I mean, I can't guess. I mean, based on their like previous behavior, I would say that they're not really willing to share information. I think the most important thing is as long as they're not able to destroy it. I know I saw Schiff talking to Rachel Maddow, I think it was last night, where he was saying that Congress has issued an order to the administration to make sure that they're not destroying any of this material on the server. Who knows if they'll actually comply? But there have to be enough people who are still working in the CIA, who work for the National Security Council, who care enough about the country that they would hopefully stop any sort of destruction or obstruction.
Now, I've been in this bubble for at least 2 hours now away from breaking news. My guess is that at some point the Republicans will do a counterattack along the lines what they did with the Mueller report and start identifying and naming the people who are the whistleblowers. Trump already said...
I mean, if the New York Times doesn't before them...
Yes. Okay. Have they released the name yet?
No. So this was controversial. They were listing identifying factors of the whistleblower, and Dean Baquet put out a note saying that it was in order to create credibility for the source, but the source is already credible because everything that the whistleblower described was almost exactly in the transcript.
So do you think they went too far, the New York Times?
Yes. Yes, because you had the president on tape at an event basically saying that this whistleblower should be murdered. So you're endangering the source.
The exact quote is, whoever did so was close to a spy, and that, quote, in the old days, spies were dealt with differently. And I think he was... it's not just the whistleblower he was talking about. He was actually talking about whoever it was that fed the whistleblower the information about the phone call, because the whistleblower did not have firsthand knowledge of the phone call. So it'd be like more people.
I mean, so the whistleblower was identified by the New York Times as a CIA analyst, so who was stationed at the White House. So his job was to constantly have conversations with the people who were in the middle of like all of these different calls or, like national security operations.
All right, so there's that leads me to the next question, the media's role in all this. But before we do, let me just follow up with my guess is if the reaction to the Mueller report or to the investigation into Russiagate is any indication, pretty soon the Republicans will name operatives, name analysts who are somehow have ties to different Democrats, different Democratic campaigns. They'll try to make you said what's very important that we remove politics for this and talk specifically exactly about what went down. But my guess is that Republicans will immediately try to bring politics into it as much as they can in order to discredit the investigation and to give talking points to all the people they trot out into Fox. So is that your sense of how they're going to proceed?
I don't know, because so if you looked at the first wave of comments yesterday, they were ostensibly all no comments. Every Republican senator said, I didn't read it. So the question is, have we reached a point where, again, they're going to make a calculation that having Trump on the ticket is going to be a bigger drag on the party and everything they want than what they previously perceived? And again, I don't know if that we've necessarily reached that point, and you're always going to have a Devin Nunes who does whatever it is that Devin Nunes wants to do. But on this, it's been interesting to see on the Senate side that they just totally dodged it for the most part, and now have this 2-week break. And I think that, Mitch is going to be pretty feverish in trying to figure out what he wants to do next. I mean, the on the House side, I don't know what's wrong with Kevin McCarthy. Like Kevin McCarthy and Steve Scalise have just been tweeting up a storm about how all of this is garbage and trying to show old clips of Democrats railing against Clinton's impeachment. But some of them have to be smart enough to know that this is different. And it'll also be interesting to see what someone like a Lamar Alexander from Tennessee does, right? I've seen some people float around a lot of names of Senate Republicans who might finally be the one who stands up. Like Mitt Romney is always like the DC media center of intrigue, which he's never done anything to prove that. But you have quite a few retiring Senate Republicans who used to be more normal and who still have some semblance of DNA of like caring about the country or once believing in things. So if you're a Lamar Alexander who's been there forever, who, has been a committee chairman, who, was committed to education and supported No Child Left Behind, which you may argue that wasn't great public policy. It's since been revamped, but at least it was emblematic
Public
of having
policy.
having a belief that you could do something
policy,
with a role to try to improve people's lives, right? What do those people do when they're not up for re-election, when all they think about is their legacy, and it doesn't really matter if Trump posts something like negative about them on Twitter because they're done. Maybe I think that if anyone is going to flip and there's any sort of movement, it might be someone like that. Like I'm less intrigued by Mitt, even though there was a big
Susan
story
Collins. That's what all Democrats always look to me.
Can I tell you my really hot take about Susan Collins?
Go ahead.
And I am convinced that I'm right about this. I mean, I'm usually convinced I'm right about most things, but I'm especially convinced I'm right about this. So Susan Collins for a long time served alongside Olympia Snowe, who was an actual moderate Republican from Maine, who was actually pro-choice and who was actually a good senator. So people lumped the two of them together because at the time everyone else in the Senate was just a bunch of old white dudes.
Yes.
So I was like, oh, like Susan Collins is this great moderate defender of things. But really they just were thinking about Olympia Snowe.
Yeah.
Susan Collins was always jonesing to be like one of the amigos with John McCain and Lindsey Graham and just like talking about bombing all of the Middle East. Olympia Snowe was the good senator.
So they're just confused. Well, that's. I wish I knew that back in during the Brett Kavanaugh days. But
I could have told you.
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Everybody was waiting. How is she going to go on this vote? And that was one of the most disappointing turnouts. All right. The media's role in all this. You were there. You were part of the media beast in Washington for several years. What role will the media be playing in this unfolding?
My hope, although I'm not holding my breath, is that they don't focus on this political part of it. Like, what does this mean? Because the political part is the safe part, right? The political part and the point scoring part is the thing that you can easily both sides. The substantive part, the integrity of the republic, the integrity of our election systems, that's harder to both sides because right now, one side is the bad faith actor and one side isn't. And so my hope is that the vast majority of the reporting, the meaningful reporting, looks at the substance of what's being unearthed. I am not convinced that that is even going to be the majority of the coverage, but if the media were to be responsible, that would be the focus of the coverage, but it's harder. That's the harder work. We're seeing some of it, right? I think the reason we're here, the reason this inquiry is being opened was, again, what we discussed earlier. Adam Schiff put out this statement, investigative reporters at some of our flagship newspapers went after it, right? So that part is good. It's the political speculative part that is bad, and that's the thing you're going to see, reporters asking Democrats who are out on the trail right now, right? You have all of these embeds who are chasing every single Democratic candidate for president, and they shouldn't be asking all the time, what do you think this means for your prospects in 2020? Because that's a distraction, but that's the easy part, and that's the part, again,
there's some editor in Washington asking them to ask that.
Of course, because let me tell you how editors in Washington work. They wake up in the morning, they watch Morning Joe, they see whatever these insiders are talking about to each other, and that's what they want you to report on. And that's divorced oftentimes from, one, the reality of the world that we live in, but also just like the important stuff, right? We shouldn't let groupthink take hold, and we shouldn't let the politics of this dictate how we talk about it, because at the end of the day, when people talk about this 100 years from now, when some poor person, hopefully not in Texas, writes the history books for what we're living through right now, it's not going to be the he said, she said political horse race tracking polls. It's going to be the substantive nature of, like, were we able to protect the integrity of the executive branch? Did the legislative branch hold the executive in check? And were we able to continue? Because the rebuilding process is going to be incredibly hard. Like, we've spent the past 25 years eroding the institutions of this republic, whether it was trust in media or trust in government. And again, I'm not going to both sides that erosion. I think that there's one party that was more responsible for it than the other. But in order to reemerge, I think we're going to have to be really honest and confront as honestly and as substantively as possible the moment we're living through now and what's happened and how much has already been traded away and how much have we lost in order to build back and to gain again.
All right, that is Meredith Shiner. That was one heck of a riff that she closed down the show with, or at least this portion of the show with. Thank you very much for coming in here, sharing all your knowledge. I am definitely going to ask you to come back. Maybe have you be our special.
I love that this is.
whistleblower
I
date.
love this is like the running bit at the end of the show. Like Jimmy Kimmel is like, I ran out of time for Matt Damon.
Yeah. Well, we have the Heartland Mamas here. Unless you want to stick around for them, I'm sure they have some interesting thoughts on Whistleblower Gate as well. Like they got their coffee ready.
I mean, I was a little nervous when you said that I was the opening act for the Heartland Mamas because that sounded a lot more fun than what I was going to bring to the table.
Well, if you want to stick around, the Heartland Mamas are only too happy to share the mic, and we'll make that decision as we take this break. We'll be right back after this.
Today's Ben Joravsky Show was brought to you in part by Chicago Architecture Center. Discover the breadth and majesty of Chicago's architecture on a Chicago Architecture Center bus tour. From bungalows to Bauhaus, our expert docents will share the fascinating stories behind our city's architecture. Book your tour at architecture.org/tours. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm actually on a bus tour right now. Oh my, look at that wonderful piece of architecture. Get a special discount for Illinois residents from July 15th to August 15th. All Illinois residents get 50% off select walking tours. Visit architecture.org/IL-resident. Read the Chicago Reader to get up to speed on what's what in Chicago. Culture, food, arts and entertainment, weekly concert listings, weekly event listings, the environment, travel. I can continue, but you get the point. And for all of you Chicago political junkies, raw weekly columns on real city politics from Maya Dukmasova and our very own Ben Joravsky. The Chicago Reader, free to the public in newsstands throughout the city and online at chicagoreader.com. Read it now and be a more informed Chicagoan.
Take a chill pill, man.
There are people here I know who disagree with me about this proposal, and that's healthy in our democracy. But to be clear, doing nothing is not an option.
Hey, everybody, what you're about to hear are the piano stylings of Jeff Manuel. Man, listen to Jeff go. Jeff Manuel has been playing piano around Chicago for years. He's played for conventions, for celebrities, played in basement bars with blues bands. He's played at prestigious social clubs, fine restaurants, and in the intimacy of private homes. Book Jeff Manuel at jeffemanuelpianist.com. Don't worry, I'll spell his name at the end of this commercial. You know what Chicago Magazine said? They said that Jeff Manuel is, quote, as comfortable with Chopin as he is with Cole Porter. He's excellent and his performance is joyous. He offers an elegant stream of compositions and interpretations that entertains the mind but won't hurt the ears. To hear more of Jeff Manuel's work and to book Jeff for your next event, go to jeffmanuelpianist.com. I'm going to spell it out for you, people. J-E-F-F. M as in Mary, A, N as in Nancy, UELPIANIST.com. Take it away, Jeff Manuel.
Welcome back to the Ben Joravsky Show. Benny J, take it away.
Heidi Henry in the studio, Murray Briel in the studio. Yeah, the Heartland Mamas have returned. Meredith Shiner said, "Oh man, I got to meet the Heartland Mamas." So,
They're the celebrities I never knew I needed to meet, and now I'm here.
all right, well, Heidi Henry and Murray, explain to Meredith and everybody else why you're called the Heartland Mamas.
You want to take it away, Murray?
Sure. Well, Heidi and I are tired of hearing all of the pundits and the media telling us that the Heartland folks are all conservative, we're all Trump voters, it's all red. And we started talking, that's not the case. There's a lot of areas in Illinois particularly that are turning blue, that are purple, counties that we've won that we haven't won before. So as we were talking, we decided that we would do something together. And then we were talking about presidential candidates, and we decided we needed a woman. Not just a woman, but a mother. Because who's better to take care of a dysfunctional nation? Just like a big family reunion or holiday. You got drunk Uncle so-and-so in the corner. You got crazy Aunt Mary claiming that there's aliens coming out of the tree. You got the teenagers who are too busy on their phones to care about anything. So it's kind of a good example for our country. And we said it's about time we have some mamas to kick things into gear.
And Heidi, of course, ran in the State Senate District 38 against Sue Resin, which is a red district.
It is.
Right?
It's really pretty purple.
It's actually way more purple than you think.
Well, what did Clinton get in that? Do you remember?
I don't remember.
Okay, yeah.
And I told you I wasn't a Clinton supporter because he was a dog.
Yeah, well.
So my husband talked me into voting for Perot the first time.
Oh, my God.
I know. Can you believe I would vote for that?
Well, we're now, okay, I don't want to go back to ancient history, but I will say this. I've always said that I thought that Bill Clinton was the luckiest guy in the world because Perot was in a race. But now you're proving the point that when I ever say this, my good friend Mick Dumke always says, well, Ben, Perot took as many votes from Clinton as he took from George Bush, and you're proving sort of...
I'm kind of proving Mick's point, yes.
Yeah, but I still think for every one of you, there were two who would have voted for Bush, and George Bush would have won re-election in 1992 if not for Ross Perot. And so everything that Clinton said that Democrats should do is really based on a fallacy. Everything that Clinton says about moving to the right to claim the middle is based on him having a third-party candidate that siphoned off Republican votes.
There is no middle because the middle is actually to the right. The middle's gone. The middle is owned by the right. So anytime somebody tells you, I mixed it up with my state representative last night at a meeting because he is a move to the middle actually to the right Democrat who voted against RHA, who voted against Fix the Void. He voted against women and children repeatedly. And he's a newly elected person. And so when he wanted to come and talk to me about it, and I've been trying to reach out to him for months since he's been elected about these issues, when you take those bread and butter democratic value issues off the table, and the only thing you're willing to vote for as a Democrat is right to work legislation and some cherry-picked union legislation, and you're willing to throw domestic violence victims, gun victims, children, school children, and all women's rights under the bus, I'm sorry, I don't care where you live, you're wrong, and you're a dino. So,
I completely agree. We have a lot of dinos running out in that area. Democrats.
I just figured out what it was. Democrats are named old. It took me a while, Meredith. I'm like, dinos.
I thought you were actually just saying that they were dinosaurs. That they were old white dudes who were out of touch.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that too.
They're the good old boys. And my area is just swamped with them.
I was like, dino. I heard rhino because I'm on the Tea Party mailing list or email. I get all their emails. They're talking about rhinos. So it took me a while, but I figured out what a rhino was.
He used Tea Party talking points to defend his position yesterday. Tea Party and NRA talking points is how he was defending his vote to me yesterday. Do you know how irritating that is? I mean, I don't expect him to be a progressive like me, but I expect him to be a Democrat.
All right. Well, this, again, Meredith was just counseling me not to go political and just...
Oh, sorry.
But there is political ramifications to all this stuff. So before we go back to Whistleblowergate, I think the standard strategy of the Democratic Party when dealing with districts like yours is to go right. And I remember this from the 26 congressional campaigns when the Democrats took back the House. And Mayor Rahm, at the time, he was Congressman Rahm, his strategy was to find Democrats who in many ways were just like Republicans, but happened to be running under the Democratic banner. Right. And that is how you win.
So you're talking about 2006, and I want to say something. It wasn't necessarily, the thing that was so damaging in like a persistent way wasn't necessarily the candidates he chose. It was that, if you remember, Rahm and Howard Dean were having this fight. So Rahm was the head of the campaign arm of House Democrats, and Howard Dean was running the DNC. And what Rahm said is I want to invest in the races that I think I can win, and then I don't want to pay attention to the races that I can't. Whereas Howard Dean wanted to invest in a 50-state strategy, which was we shouldn't leave any state behind. Every state should have a functioning Democratic Party, because you should compete and you should run races and you should make everything on the board competitive. Because when you think about all of these campaign organizations, whether it's the DNC, the D-TRIP, or the DSCC, particularly in a world pre-Citizens United, they were the money clearinghouses. And by divesting, you weakened all of these state legislatures. Right. And then all of those state legislatures drew maps. And now you have congressional maps that don't match the actual population and how they're voting. So, you know, I think that, look, people talk about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and they talk about progressives from the last cycle. Not every district is going to be as liberal as AOC's. Like, I hear this all the time when national reporters are talking about the Lipinski race, for example. Like, Dan Lipinski is a Republican. Yes. I don't know that AOC could run in that district and win, but when you look at Lauren Underwood and Sean Casten, who I would say are progressives, but they're not nearly as far to the left.
I actually think AOC could win in that district. Sanders won that district over Hillary Clinton in 2016.
He did. And here's the thing.
In a primary.
Right. Well, that's what she would have. That's what AOC would have to win. AOC would have to win the primary. Winning the primary is tantamount to winning the election.
All I'm saying is that like every district isn't the same. And like when you look at the Democrats who won last cycle, I think that they were pretty true Democrats, but they sort of fell on a spectrum. And you should allow for a spectrum, but because we shouldn't flatten it. So the problem with Rahm was not necessarily all of the candidates he picked in that moment. Yeah. I'm sure there have been many more problems since then. In the past 13 years, you can build a pretty long resume. It's that every state should have a Democratic Party.
Well, that's part of why we decided to do what we do, is because there are areas where we are building this bench that wasn't there before, and we are taking back areas, and we want to reach those folks who feel like they are lost. We were in Princeton in Bureau County to do one of the first debates.
Oh, this is good.
And there's a young gentleman who's there, and you know, he looks late 20s and comes in and no one had knew him, and we're talking to folks, and it turns out he had moved to Rochelle. He was a teacher. And he was so excited to see Democrats, because in Bureau, you'll see the Trump trucks, like Trump all over it.
Army trucks.
Yeah, decked out in trucks. Republican, in Trump talking points. His girlfriend had moved here from the city to be with him. And she was afraid for him to come to the Democratic headquarters. She was terrified, afraid somebody was going to do something during the debate. That's insane that you should be able to that you would feel like that.
Well, I think it's insane to be afraid in Princeton. So,
you know, this is really interesting. My husband makes this point. So I met him in D.C., but he grew up in Georgia, and he grew up in the district that's now the Lucy McBath district. But when they were talking about the Ossoff race, when Ossoff lost, you know, one of the things that got talked about in 2016 were yard signs, right? Famously, infamously, the Hillary Clinton campaign wasn't giving out yard signs to people. They're like, oh, this isn't important. And when my husband grew up, like when he was in high school, he made friends with someone, and they made friends, and they were the first Democrats each other had met. And there was like something about being able to put a yard sign like in your yard to say, hey, like, I'm a Democrat. Not everyone you know on this block or in this
Right.
town is a Republican was really important.
And that's why places like Princeton, to have a county party office, Bureau County had never had one before. They do now. Kendall County had never had one before. And last year they opened one in Oswego, and it's packed. So there's all these areas that are going.
All right, let me
more.
ask you this. By the way, did I hear you correctly? You had to buy your Hillary Clinton's yard
I did.
sign?
My husband in 2016, he bought me a shirt for every day of the week. We had stemware and not one but 4 Hillary Clinton signs because I live in the country and I have a big yard. So.
Yeah. By the way, she's the horse trainer, everybody. Remember, she's the horse whisperer. Are you whispering the horse about whistleblower gate?
You know, we were talking this morning. So.
You and Mr. Ed.
Me and Shane. Shane's my horse.
Shane's the horse. All right. So when you talk about it's exciting that people are showing up, what are driving people to show up at Democratic activities? What's motivating people?
I really think that people are looking for answers that they're not getting from Fox News. And, you know, when you talk about whistleblower gate, I went and tuned into local Ottawa radio yesterday and couldn't believe, it's like, why do I turn this on? You know, because it's so slanted. They were focusing on a poll that was done 2 months ago about impeachment instead of talking about today's issues to dissuade people from wanting impeachment. So when we talk about these bread and butter issues like healthcare is huge. We keep talking. We need to be sure we're talking that point. We need to be sure as Democrats we're talking about climate change because that is directly impacting the things that happen in our area. And when we get distracted from healthcare issues, economic issues, climate issues, and we start talking about LGBTQ issues, which are super important, and we start talking about women's rights issues, specifically reproductive care, we start splitting our party down. And what we do know as a fact is that when we can win on climate and healthcare and education and economics, when we can win on those issues, those other ones will fall into place. As a feminist, as somebody who believes that sustainable feminism must come first before sustainable progressivism, I understand the fact that there are things that we need to do to put in place to make everything happen. It's like dominoes. You got to set them up in order or building with blocks. So when I look at these issues out by us, when we get off track and we start talking about social issues instead of the issue of do you have your medication? Do you have access to your doctor? Can you get help? Out by us, people literally have died in labor because we've lost rural hospital systems. So we need to make sure that we keep those issues in front of people and we stop talking about things that we really can't control. We can't do a federal background check here in Illinois. We can't. We have no ability to do that. So when our local politicians are stuck on that issue, they forget that there's a bigger issue that we can win on.
All right. Let you get a thought in. You're about to say something, and get your thought, then I will get curious what Meredith's response is. Go ahead.
Well, I think the biggest problem in the Heartland, in those purple areas, in those reddish blue areas, is that our messaging is incorrect. As a party, we are really bad. We have allowed our terms to be co-opted into something that they're not. And when you talk to people, we've been to Ohio and been to a Trump rally. We talk to people who are Republican supporters and Trump lovers. And when you take away the terms, when you take away socialism, when you take away and you simply talk about the facts, like, how are the tariffs doing? Well, what do you mean tariffs? Most of the time they don't know. And you start talking and go, well, are the farmers doing better or worse? Or are you doing better or worse? Well, the stock market's great. Yeah, the stock market's great. So I don't have much in stocks, do you? No. Are you making more than you did 4 years ago?
Those were questions
No.
we asked when we were in Cincinnati. Those are people we stopped to talk to on the street that were Trump supporters.
And once you start breaking down those terms that have been co-opted and made so derogatory by the right, people are like, no, that's why, yeah, we should really think about that. Oh, that's good. So it's reframing the conversation is huge.
We are terrible on messaging, just terrible.
I know you have thoughts.
Look, I'm not going to pretend like I have some of the firsthand on the ground knowledge that you all do, but I remember when I was here last time, we were talking about healthcare and the debates because it was around one of the Democratic debates. And I think one of the things that Democrats have really failed on, although I think Cory Booker made this point in one of the many debates that I've watched, is that at the end of the day, every Democrat on that stage believes in universal healthcare.
Yes.
What do we mean by universal healthcare? That everyone should have access to health insurance and that healthcare is a human right. There are disagreements right now about how to get there, but if you look at the past decade, Democrats were the ones who risked their careers to vote for the Affordable Care Act.
Yes.
Some of them lost. Democrats have time and time again fought against Republican assaults to this law. Is it succeeding the way it should? It is not. But right now you see candidates who are having a debate over whether or not we should have single payer or a public option, and that doesn't matter nearly as much as presenting that there is unanimity in the Democratic Party that people should have this access and that Republicans are trying to take it away. And so we shouldn't get hung up on buzzwords, right? Medicare for all doesn't mean anything because it means something different to each candidate. What does mean something is I believe everyone should have access to health insurance, and everyone on this stage, every Democrat in Congress for the most part, except for Dan Lipinski, is committed to making sure that Americans in this country have access to health insurance, because without insurance, you don't get access to the kind of care that you need. When you talk about rural hospitals, one of the most disappointing and distressing things is that 75% of the rural hospitals that have closed, I think in the past decade, have closed in states where Republican governors refuse to expand Medicaid just out of spite.
And one of the things that's really concerning when you live in those rural areas is that 2 out of 5 hospitals in rural areas are owned by the Catholic healthcare system, which allows them to deny reproductive health care. It allows them to restrict birth control. We've actually had a lot of issues with that out in LaSalle.
In LaSalle County, we have OSF controls every hospital but one.
Now, all right, Heidi, now let me get back to something that you were talking about, like the social issues that are controversial, social issues that can peel, wedge issues, basically, is what they are.
Wedge issues,
They're very emotional. You could peel people who would, away from the Democratic Party.
Right.
Democrats absolutely can say, let's just agree to disagree and move on and concentrate on the things that we really believe in, even if there's some nuanced differences between us on some of these other issues. But and this is what I was getting at earlier with Meredith in terms of whistleblower gate, it's not like it's not as though the Republicans are just going to be sitting back and allowing you to say, oh yeah, we're going to have our moment here. They were going to force someone like you to tell people what's your position on abortion. I mean, they won't call it reproductive rights. They'll call it abortion. So
and I think that's part of the way Democrats need to reframe the abortion debate. It is not about abortion. It is about access to women's health care. And when we take that fight word out and we start talking about access to health care, out where I live, we lost a hospital in Streeter. So now it's over an hour to get in to give birth somewhere. And God help you if you're having problems or you're having a home birth that goes badly or, the baby comes early or anything can happen. And the thing with limiting our access to reproductive care through Planned Parenthood, which started in my lifetime, and was in the basement of every county health department dispensing simple reproductive health care to young and poor women. That's where they started, and that's where they belong. When I was down in Springfield and Sangamon County, they're now giving out, I can't remember the name of the pill to prevent HIV, the spread of the disease, the deadly, deadly disease of HIV and AIDS. So they're giving away the other pill, as they call it, and I can't think of the name of it. Truvada, yeah. So they're giving it away to protect the people that live there, thanks be to God. I mean, how wonderful that we have something that can protect vulnerable people. Why is it that that's okay, but you can go there and get discounted or free birth control even at our health department, but we can't have a specific measure to help prevent unwanted and unplanned pregnancies, which is the cause of abortion. So that's taking back our verbiage as women and calling it healthcare. It is just part of being who we are. But I wanted to tell you that I was in Kansas last week. And in Kansas, they elected a Democratic governor. And I was able to talk to one of their legislators there. Part of their package going into that election was to expand Medicaid because they were at the risk of losing 16 rural hospitals. Now, I had never been to Kansas before. The word vast and Kansas go together. I mean, oh my God, it's just grass forever. Yeah. It's beautiful. Yeah. But you get to a hospital in the middle of nowhere, and it's no bigger than my indoor riding arena that I ride Shane in. Seriously, it's 60 by 135 is my indoor. And their hospital system is about that size. And it's in the middle of nowhere surrounded by tens of thousands of take hours to get to for people. And it's going to go away because when they elected this governor and they only had 41% of their legislature, none of the Republicans came on board and they didn't take Medicaid expansion.
And by the way, this was free money. The first 2 years were 100% funded by the federal government. And I believe that through 2021, it was more than 90%. So it was just turning down free money.
Sitting there, but they don't do a good job of messaging. You have to understand the biggest employer in Kansas is Koch brothers and Koch subsidiaries. But after that, ranching and healthcare are the top employers.
Look, you invited me onto this show weeks ago to talk about something that was women's health related. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole, but I do think it's too long of a conversation to start now, but I do think that we need to have a more honest conversation about what access to women's healthcare means, because for so many years, the conversation around women's healthcare has been completely vilified by people who hate women, right? Planned Parenthood isn't just giving abortions to everyone. That's not the Title X. The Title X money that they get is to provide healthcare at low cost to people who need it most. And now when you see states like Missouri where they only have one clinic left, this is a huge problem, and people are driving for us to go there, and that clinic is at risk of shuttering. Mm-hmm. Every woman in every state in this country should have equal access to the kind of health care she needs to live a healthy life. And that looks different for different women, but we should have that fundamental belief. And I think that the conversation that frames women's healthcare is just rife with misogyny. Yes. And it's left us in this place where women are sick, where women are dying, where we have higher maternal death rates, particularly if you're a woman of color, than most other countries. And why is that? And why is that okay? And to have an honest conversation about what women healthcare means, it should be part of the larger healthcare conversation. If people believe, as they do so passionately, that healthcare should be a human right, well, women are human too.
Yes,
exactly.
It's got to be part of the health care debate, period.
And I'd like to throw in there with what you said, autonomous. That's a big thing. We have the right to control our bodies, so we should be able to do that, decide what's best for us, like you said. Exactly.
And we just want the ability.
It doesn't mean we're going to make everybody. That's the biggest argument I hear is, well, then everybody will get an abortion.
You ran for state senate. Mm-hmm. Was this issue used against you? Was the abortion issue used against you?
I told you, Ben, the only issues used against me were by my own party.
You have told me that a few times on the air.
And have I ever elaborated? No.
But we're talking about in the general election.
Yeah. No, it never came up. And when the vote came up after, it was completely a non-issue in my race. Education funding was an issue. I have to tell you, the person I ran against would never debate me. We only got to speak in the same place twice, and I mopped the floor with her twice. So,
if I may say so.
If I may say so. Well, that was. I
would just love to see the three of you are speaking so passionately about this issue, and I would just love.
Am I an honorary mama now?
Yeah,
you could be an honorary mama. We would love that.
Doris Davenport is an honorary mama too. But I would love to see somebody just do the counterpunch that you're doing right here. The counterpunch
Yeah.
in a debate. Boom. Democrats seem they're so scared of this issue. They
And
run
that's
away.
why we go back to reframing the argument, taking back what we're trying to accomplish as Democrats, as human beings, decency, empathy. It's
For All, which is one of the biggest pro-choice women's healthcare advocacy groups in the country, just celebrated its 50th anniversary. And last night there was this big event in New York, and lots of like famous political women and celebrities, they all attended this event, and they had different panels. And one of the things that I was really interested to see when I was looking at people who were posting from the event, they had a conversation with the president of NARAL and a researcher from Media Matters, and they showed a graph of where people get their news and information about abortion, and a plurality of it comes from anti-choice conservative websites.
Yes.
And then that information gets amplified on Facebook. And so I've been having a lot of conversations lately about whether or not it makes sense to engage in these conversations, because by engaging in them, you might bring more attention to the people who are promoting the propaganda. But the problem is that if we don't have honest conversations about the reality of women's healthcare, the reality of abortion, the reality of loss, then we let all of the information come from these websites that are anti-science, because this is one of the things that we really need to fight to frame it. It's not just anti-woman, because some people don't care about
like
women.
the heartbeat bills.
It's
all of the
yes.
heartbeat bills that have been coming out, and not any in the last couple months, but we had an onslaught of them with every state you can imagine that was a red state. And Heidi's mom was actually an OBGYN nurse. And the best part is exactly what you said. They frame it as a heartbeat bill, when actually it's not technically a heartbeat. It's the electrical impulses, because it isn't able
of molecules slamming together.
Yes, so they're claiming that it's a heartbeat, but it actually isn't medically and scientifically.
Well, and I'm just oversimplifying that, but it's just energy, and it's not a baby, right? So when we talk about it is, are you really a mama? Are you a mama? No, not
well,
a fur mama?
Yeah.
Fur baby mama?
It's very complicated.
I'm sorry. So
No,
we could throw down about complicated stuff, but I have furry grandchildren, so I just and I have no problem with that. I love them, but as a person who struggled with fertility issues, I really struggled. My kids are 8 years apart, and then as I'm on the table having my daughter, after struggling to have her, the doctor makes my husband sign off on my tubal. If I hadn't had a spinal, I would have gotten up and beat him. But I couldn't move at that moment. Not him.
Okay.
Dr. Wong.
Dr. Wong. Okay.
He was wonderful, and I loved him very much.
Back then, there was a law that said that you had to have your husband's approval if you wanted to have a tubal ligation, and that was 22 years ago.
24. Almost, 24 years ago. So, here am I. I'm numb from the neck down, having this another emergency C-section after struggling to have children. Are you sure you don't want to have any more? Do you think I want to put myself through this? Do you really think that I want to put my family through this every time? No, I'm done. If Stan has to sign that paper, then do it. Stan, sign it quickly, because if you don't, I'm doing it myself.
Wow.
Well, I can figure it out. So
I know you have something you want to say, Meredith, so say it.
Look, I think that when we talk about women's health care, we should have conversations that are scientifically grounded, that are grounded in reality, that are not only pro-woman, but pro-family.
Yes.
So when we talked a few weeks ago about you wanting to have me on, it was because I had written an open letter to House Republican leader Kevin McCarthy that had run in the Daily Beast, because a little more than a month ago, I guess it was 5 or 6 weeks ago now, I went into preterm labor, and I was 5 months pregnant, and we lost our son, and he was born alive. But the House Republicans have promoted this anti-science, anti-woman, and anti-family legislation called the Born Alive Survivors Protection.
Yes.
And they post pictures of healthy 6-month babies, and no woman is 14 months pregnant wanting to have an abortion. 99% of abortions that happen in this country happen before 21 weeks. No woman is walking around 9 months pregnant not wanting a child. They've designed legislation to remedy a problem that doesn't exist, and it would just put the doctors and nurses who helped me and helped my family on our worst day in prison, because that's what they want to do, is they want to send doctors and nurses to jail because they want to promote this reality to scare people who live in communities like yours, to make them think that there are these big bad liberals who live in cities and want to murder babies. Guess what? If you were 9 months pregnant, delivered a baby in a street, and left that baby in a dumpster, you would go to prison because you would actually be prosecuted. They're not designing bills to fix problems. What they are doing is trying to scare people. They're trying to own the conversation by framing women, doctors, nurses, and criminals by building an alternate reality that doesn't exist. And if we don't have these conversations, if we don't create voices and faces of people who are real, like one of the reasons I did it, I used to be a congressional reporter. Every top political reporter and editor in Washington knows me. And they saw this story, and they shared this story. And House Republicans might try to put this bill on the floor again. They probably will, because everything else is going to garbage, right? But I wanted them to think about my face before they did, because it's not about point scoring. It's not about characterizing this as something to energize a base. When one party makes their position anti-science, they try to make it so that the media, when they're promoting pro-science stories, are anti-conservative. And that's destructive, because science isn't both sides. And you see it with climate change, you see it with women's health, and it's time for us to be honest about where we are.
Women, we have to stop vilifying women for having reproductive issues, period. Having struggled with them under certain legislation, the things that I went through, I would have ended up in jail for something my body just could not do on its own. So, when I read about the ectopic, telling people that they can take an ectopic.
Okay, that is absolutely the most bananas.
Well, okay. And here's what's so bananas about it. And this was what was so upsetting. So there was a pro-life propagandist who posted this video to Facebook where she was saying that there is no circumstance under which a woman's life is at risk during a pregnancy, and they're trying to say that ectopic pregnancies aren't dangerous to women. And so then Facebook had this new fact-checking team that went to fact-check this video, and then you had Ted Cruz and Josh Hawley and 2 other Senate Republicans have Facebook take the fact check down, because the fact check was anti-conservative, because conservatives have positioned themselves as anti-science. Yeah. That's so
Did Facebook
messed
take it down?
up.
They took it down.
They took the fact check down, so the video is still out there as propaganda.
So the video remains, but the fact check is gone.
But not the information associated.
So we have all this
Zuckerberg.
We have all this misinformation out there, and the problem is it gets women killed. It kills us because we can't have the health care that we need.
Well, and one of the things that is so important that ties in with that is the fact that a lot of areas don't get shows like this. When we were driving down to Ohio, it was all conservative. It was all conservative radio. We heard a sheriff's deputy say that if any of those protesters at the Trump rally step out of line, actually, we're coming with billy clubs and we'll beat you down. This is what people are hearing, and they don't have access to broadband. Cell service is often sketchy. You don't have Sirius.
The one thing we noticed,
you're trapped with a lack of information.
What we noticed when we went south to go see to Cincinnati and
lots of Jesus signs.
When you drive down 65 through Indiana, every 30 miles there's a God installation, an angry, vengeful God installation, either in art or in wording. And I've never felt so threatened in my life until we went to stop. I forgot my toothbrush, and we're in the Walgreens, and a guy is got a Bushmaster strapped to his back. I'm like, for Walgreens in Kentucky. I really wanted to go home.
I really do think that we should build a wall between Illinois and Indiana and make Indiana pay for it.
I'm totally okay with that.
Yeah, I think we'd be better off.
All my Hoosier friends out there, those thoughts and opinions are Meredith Shiners, and they all do not reflect the larger opinions of the Ben Joravsky Show. We're going to take a brief break and come right back.
Today's Ben Joravsky Show is brought to you in part by Green Element Resale. They're located at 6241 North Broadway in Chicago, and people, they are amazing. Monday through Saturday, 11 a.m. until 7 p.m. Sundays, 12 until 7 p.m. 7 days a week. Books, furniture, appliances, lamps, clothes. It's a thrift shop, but it's the only thrift shop in Chicago that helps bring you the Ben Joravsky Show. I'm looking at pictures right now of Green Element. Oh, there's Scattergories. I see Scattergories. Everybody, you can get Scattergories right now at Green Element Resale. Better get there fast. I only see one Scattergories, all right? So, also, I'm looking here. I'm looking at Green Element Oh, there's a scarf. Guys, a scarf right now. GreenElementResale.com. And you can call them as well. Green Element Resale. Let's see if I can find the phone number of these guys. They're at 6241 North Broadway in Chicago, right between Devon and Granville. It's a fantastic place. It's greenelementresale.com. Hang tight, I'll get you the number. Maybe you can call them up and say, hey, hold on to that scarf for me. Hold on, I'll get the number. 1 second. Green Element Resale is awesome, guys. 6241. Here we go. 773-942-6522. It's Green Element Resale. Go there and save tons of money. Welcome back to the Ben Joravsky Show, live from the Chicago Sun-Times.
We're at the end of a show, a great show. It has been a very moving show. The Heartland Mamas are in the studio. Heidi Henry, Murray Briel. Meredith Shiner stuck around after giving
Also a Heartland Mama
She's now an honorary Heartland Mama. Yeah. She's got a badge to show it and everything. It seems like your numbers grow every time you come to the show. You enlisted Doris Davenport the last time you were here. So before we head out the door, Heidi, you got any messages you want to give? Any promotions you want to give? Any websites, etc., and so forth?
Sure. Heartland Mamas, MAMAS.com. We're working on a 4-part series of the Great Red Divide Tour. I did 2,000 miles through the Midwest and the Great Plains, talking to people, public servants, politicians, people that own businesses, lots and lots of farmers, a couple of ranchers. Found out that we're actually related to 2 people that work cows on horses, with horses every day. I had no idea. And talking to them about the issues that hit them right there in those red states. And like I related some of what I heard in Kansas, and the people in Kansas are terrified about their health care. They are really in a bad place right now. In Iowa, we're going to talk about Iowa tomorrow when we record, and the problems that Joni Ernst has manufactured for her state with her horrible lack of leadership. And the people that I ran into that are running against her coming up, she said that she's so focused on ethanol that she can't read a whistleblower report.
It's like
9 pages.
Yeah, 9 pages.
Guys, it's right here. You don't even have to read the whole report. It's New York Times made us put it on the front page.
Tweeted that he read it on his way walking from the car to the
It was pretty quick.
It's not like this one, okay? The Mueller report, which of course I've read, by the way.
Do you have like political lit, like bookmarking your pages in the Mueller report? Because that's a scene.
Let's not let that get out, all right? Well, there was a long time where I was obsessively reading sections of the Mueller report on this show, and I think I enjoyed the Mueller report a little too much.
Do you know there's a Mueller report bookclub.com, so you can actually form a Mueller report book club if you want.
All right. I did not know that.
in my travels, I was invited to the steak fry. I brought you a little bit of stuff there, and I got to hear 19 different candidates speak. And
when we were at the Iowa State Fair, it was like the last day of the Hickenlooper campaign, but he was giving out koozies. So I'm sure those will be a collector's item that no one will want one day.
You've got a lot of Tom Steyer stickers here.
Well,
He's got a lot of money to print the stickers.
I was going to say. Yeah.
Here's the interesting thing about, I was actually a guest of Kamala Harris, who stood me up.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow. She's going to lose that Heartland Mama vote.
Oh, yeah. Not necessarily. I would vote for a turnip over,
over Donald John?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So, but there was no merch at her place except for a couple of stickers and a waterlogged sign, so I brought that back. But you had to pay for Biden stuff. You could get pretty much anything you wanted from Williamson. Some of it at a small fee. But I noticed that, there you go. I tried to bring
Even
it back.
the button weirds me out. Like, also, like, if you're wearing that, are you trying to send a signal to the world that you're an anti-vaxxer?
Does it look like Tori Amos to you from the 80s, from the 90s? I can see that.
Well, her booth was all pink and light blue, and you could buy a selection of her books.
Wait,
there.
I'm sorry. Is this Iowa or Illinois?
This is Iowa,
okay.
yeah.
All right, we have run out of time. We're going to shut down this show for the day. We have some bonus episodes coming up, and we have, don't forget, we're going to have our trivia contest. Are we going to put that on the internet, D?
It's going to be live streamed. We're shooting for 5 o'clock. Hopefully we'll get it by then.
All right, very good. I want to thank Meredith Shiner. I want to thank Heidi Henry, Marie Briel, Rummana Hussain. Ladies and gentlemen, they're the Heartland Mamas. You can follow them. They have a podcast. They're super cool. They come on my show. Whatever I can get them to drive down that road to Chicago. I really appreciate it.
We love it.
We love coming. Thanks for having us. And I love you. You're amazing.
There's a lot of love in the show. And, of course, how about a little love for the man, the myth, the legend, the pride and joy of Alton, Illinois. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. D, give yourself a raise. Take it out of petty cash. See you on Tuesday, everybody.
And remember, you can download previous Ben Joravsky shows and Benny J bonus interviews at both Chicago Sun-Times and Chicago Reader websites, chicago.suntimes.com, chicagoreader.com, and wherever else you download your favorite podcasts. Downloaders, you know we live stream this show, right? It's true. Tuesdays through Fridays, 1 until 3 p.m. Central Time. Once again, at both Chicago Sun-Times and Chicago Reader websites, the Chicago Sun-Times YouTube channel. And hey, we Facebook video live stream the program as well at Benny J Show, BENNY, the letter J Show, on both Facebook and Twitter. Yeah, we're going to do a little bonus today. We're calling it for 10 trivia points. News mixed with trivia and Ben's add-on questions. It's going to be a good time. Check it out. We'll see you soon.